Hello, chat. We are back for round 4 coverage of the Rozsa Invitational here. I've got the standings. I will move me for now so you can see the standings here. After 3 rounds of the Rozsa Invitational, we have Ryan Ambergy out in front, and he's got 3 out of 3, a perfect start to the event. While we have Josh Alexander, aka General Zod, and David Luscombe tied at 2 points apiece. They will be facing each other in round number 4. That could be a critical battle to determine who finishes second, as Ryan appears to be in the driver's seat. Let's see here, getting text messages. The room. All right. So, if I was good, I could like upload them and then show them to the people of the chat who are coming in early, as the games have not yet started yet. That's why I have my camera to the left and showing the standings for everyone. And Arya and Chuck will face each other in this round, both of which are looking for their first win of the event. Tom will be facing Ryan Ambergy in a game where, if Ryan can win, he could potentially dish out a very quick draw to watch the Oklahoma City Thunder play. I'm not saying that he would do that, of course. I'm just saying that it's a line that could happen. You never know. Depends on where people's priorities are, right? But if you can clinch up first and then watch the basketball game at the same time, that seems like a win-win. So, let's see here. How do I do this effectively? Technology, we're still, by the way, waiting on the next games to go live. When game starts. Game started 3 minutes ago in theory. However, I assume that David has not spent 3 minutes to decide whether or not to play E4 or D4 or knight F3. Will we see another Alekine for the chat? Because I know that chat likes it. The general is Joshua Alexander. And last time, chat got mad at me because I didn't have the board flipped. Now I will flip the board, preemptively making chat less mad at me. So, he's got the black pieces this round. And he will look to avenge his very difficult game against Ryan Ambergy in round number 3. That being said, a lot of people have very different games against Ryan. Yeah, he played Ryan in round number 3, and yeah, I think Josh doesn't want you to go back and watch that game. He doesn't want you to go in here and then go to round 3 and then look at that game. You're mad at me for flipping the board. Make audience mad. Yes. Well, the only goal of a Twitch streamer is to make their Twitch chat angry. I don't think that we really have any other goals here. So if chat is angry, then I know I'm doing my job correctly. And if chat is happy, then I've clearly done something wrong. But this game between Josh and David is pivotal to determine who will likely finish second. What's the score round? So we are in round number 4. This is the standings. We have Ryan Ambergy at 3 points out of 3. And Josh Alexander, aka the General, and David Luscombe both tied at 2 points each. They are both perfect in their games where they did not have to face Ryan Ambergy. But in the games where they had to face Ryan, they were not perfect. And Tom Bromwich has 1.5 points. Arya has 0.5. I was going to say 0.5. I guess is 0.5 appropriate grammar? Is that, I mean, you normally would just say half a point, but 0.5 is a different way. I think 0.5 is what you say when you are a college student who has to meet 1,000 words on their essay, and then you don't actually have 1,000 words worth of content, so you say stuff like 0.5, and got to get the word count up. Is general better in classical or rapid? Well, I guess that's kind of an opinion question, but I mean, I've seen the generals rating in like rapid and blitz. I feel like the less time that you give both players, the better it is for the general. So I would say that he's probably better in rapid. He's just very fast. The general will not play Ryan again this tournament. This is a round-robin tournament where you face every player once. So the general will be facing off with David Ludscombe this round, and then he'll be facing Chuck Unruh in the final. You guess what his win rate in classical... I don't know his win rate. I mean, I know his rating. Win rate would determine a lot on who you play. Like, you could have a really high rating and have a very low win rate if you're just facing really high rated players. It looks like we have some games. The Josh Alexander, David Luskin game isn't on our way, but let's go ahead and we have a C4 from Arya. Arya of Winterfell. Or maybe not that Arya, but we got a C4 on the board and a knight F6. So he could... A lot of times these transpose into a lot of the Queen's Gambit type of openings when you've got a C4 or knight F3 open. But we'll go ahead and see. And we see a D4 immediately and a C5. So if he plays D5, we can see a B5 bingo, which is what the good players play. And we have a lot more moves in the game between Tom and Ryan Ambergy. E4, C6 playing the Caro as who said it? Mark Halsey says that this is a mouse slip, moving the pawn 1 square to C6. You should move it 2 squares to C5 to play the Sicilian. D4, D5, E5, bishop F5, and H4. A kind of unique approach by Tom. I haven't played this line myself, but I'm sure it's a thing. So we've got C4, knight F6, D4, C5, knight F3, and we're all getting our nice little Queen's Gambit formation set up. D5 kind of relieving some of the tension, not allowing C takes D. It's going to provoke probably an E6 in the near future. Zod's game has started. E4. And now Zod has gone into the tank. This is what happens when you go to the restroom at the start of the round. You start to tank on move number 1. He's debating on whether or not to play knight F6. From what I've heard. E4. This is double exclam, the best opening move. According to the streamer, I play E4. Now, I don't understand how David Luscombe has 1 hour and 33 minutes. Because we've... Clearly the time and the moves are not transmitting correctly. because the time because you start with 1 hour and 30 minutes and you get 30 seconds per move. So you can have more than 1 hour and 30 minutes, but you can't have more than 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 30 seconds after E4. It's just one move. So I don't trust what's happening here. So I'm going E5. You have insider information. Well, that's breaking news. If David knew that, then that would blow up all the preparation. So let's see Ryan's game. We have H4, H5, Bishop D3. We're exchanging bishops, and I think that Ryan likes getting that bishop exchange when you've got the pawn on C6 and the pawn on D5, being able to get that bishop off the board. And Ryan is the first person today able to say check, which is a big accomplishment. That's why he's leading the tournament, by the way. Now, they want to give the players extra time. That would be mean. Ugor is excited to see check. What do we have here? So I had delayed bingo. So bishop G7, bishop G2, castles D5, and then B5. Chuck has delayed his bingo. And now he's doing the bingo, kind of. I don't know. I was expecting an A6 some point. Oh, there we go. A6. See, this is just transposing into a bingo. So a little bit weird move order in this game, but I've played this with black before. Not this exact move order, but played this. Can I please post the link to Lee Chess again? Yes, I will do that. I will pin it on the stream as the chat has wanted me to pin things. Pin the post. Something went wrong. Unable to pin. Jeez. That is not good. Maybe Twitch has finally figured out I'm an imposter. So, a lot of these, we're eventually going to have an E6 break probably at some point by Chuck, but you can be very patient in these type of systems as well. We don't have to rush. Queen B6. Rook B8 ideas at some point. But we can be patient here. Both players should be kind of comfortably in book. Both, usually people will get in some quick moves and add some time on their clock in the bingos. Josh here in the tank after one E4. He's already out of his prep. So the general is thinking, I think D5 is the best move here. Would the chat like to see a Scandinavian? For the action. B4 from Tom. This is, I'm guessing it's a line. I'm guessing it's theory, but and interestingly, Ryan is like, I'm not taking that pawn. I'm curious, what happens if I take the pawn? Do I lose? No, I don't lose. It's like, to me, I just always want to eat the pawn. And just be like, I'm up a pawn, prove what you did means something. But evidently, Ryan instantly blitzes out Queen A6, so he doesn't like eating the pawn. I mean, I guess we could be like, we really want to be a pawn down with B4, B5. I'm joking. I have no idea. Well, if you show up to the round late, you can get a psychological edge on your opponent. So right now, David is sitting there with just alone in his own thoughts, and depending on the human, that can be a very tough place to be. You know, maybe David is going back and replaying his round one game against Ryan Ambergy, which that would be like a nightmare. And if you get that kind of in that mindset, you can go down some very dark paths. So this could be a psychological play by the general here. Chris, this is known theory in the Caro-Kann advance. You can take the pawn, but black has a full comp and rapid development after knight d2, rook b1. Good to know. Yeah, I don't play the Caro myself, and I mean I've played against it because I do play 1e4. I do not play this line, so it is unfamiliar to me. It just looks aesthetically odd to play b4, and I just want to take the free pawn. But maybe that's exactly what Tom wants. Tom wants to give up a pawn for activity and seize the initiative. You know, as the underdog against a very tough, high-rated player, it's difficult to seize the initiative. You're surprised Ryan is offering the endgame? I mean, where can you see the game, Zod, Ryan? So if you go to the link that I posted in the chat, you can go to round here. You can hit the round button right here and go to the round. And Zod versus Ryan would be round number 3. And you can see the game here. It was brutal. Just quickly go through it for those here. A little bit of a shot missed there. Slight. We learned after the game the general was getting his lines mixed up. Taking there, we see the sacrifice. We're not really even a sacrifice, just getting the material back, but a weak king for the general here is going to be everything. This knight coming in on d5 was absolutely brutal here. And Ryan getting his pressure going. And this was the point. Knight c5 was the official kind of point of no return. A brilliant sacrifice here by Ryan. And this just led to a mating net. And the general resigns here, not letting himself get checkmated. That's right. It would have been mate in one next move. But the general said, "You will not checkmate me. I resign." So a quick recap of round number 3, the general's game against Ryan. And I did that because we don't have much action here from the general as we see his clock kind of dwindled down. Yeah, Ryan played the game in round 3 in particular very, very well. Thought that was a very accurate game. And I mean, you have a little bit of luck to let's say you have a little bit of luck when your opponent makes mistakes and crosses up their lines in their opening. That being said, Ryan took absolute full advantage of it. Tom is known for some interesting options. Last year he played d4, knight f6, c4, e6, g4 against Ryan and should have won. You know what they say about someone who should have won? It means they usually lost. And sometimes they drew, but usually lost. Let's see here. Queen a6. e6 is very interesting to me. Because what I do instinctually is I'm thinking queen takes, and pawn takes, and then, yeah, I have the awkward double e pawns, but you have the awkward double d pawns, but I just have an extra pawn. And I would prefer this from black's perspective. And, oh, wait, no, there's the intermezzo by Tom. That's a good move. That's a good move. So he doesn't play a pawn down. He does have the slightly awkward structure. You did get the king out, but with no queens on the board, I don't think Ryan's going to be too worried about that. He lost, yeah. Yeah. No. The thing is, Chris, is I know a lot of people, and a lot of people who've come up to me in particular after games they've played with me, and they'll tell me this happened actually in Alabama, because this hasn't happened in Oklahoma yet because I haven't won any games in Oklahoma, or won many games in Oklahoma. But in Alabama, back when I used to win some games, some people would come back to me in another tournament. Like, oh, last tournament, if I moved my rook here and then my knight here, I should have won. And it's like, well, you didn't. I mean, if you played the entire game like Stockfish, you would have won, because I'm not playing as good as Stockfish. But I mean, I made blunders and you made blunders, but your blunders were worse than my blunders, and that's chess, right? So. Yeah, whenever someone says they should have won, I just assume they lost. Even though a draw is a potential result. How did round 3 go? Round 3 was not good for the general. He did not emerge victorious. And the eval bar over here disappeared, so I was wondering if there was a big development in this game. But one thing I will point out is a lot of viewers are going to see this eval bar say plus 1.3. The crazy thing is this is basically a theoretical bingo opening. Whenever you play the bingo, the engine says really, really mean things to you and just says you're down a full pawn. And then usually as the game goes on, you gain some of that really, really bad evaluation back. And all right, Mark Holsey says he's on Discord with me, and I will see if we can get him online. We struggled yesterday. We failed. We had failures. And we struggled to get him online. I wasn't sure if he would be back, but he is back. We're going to try to get him online on the internet, but will we be successful? He says he reset all of the settings, and we will try to get him on voice call. Bird in the trap. He did not draw. General Zod lost round number 3. I'm giving him a call. I got a message from Mike. They're having issues with Josh and David's board. So Josh is here, General Zod is here, but the board is not transmitting moves. So I have sent a call out to Mark, and all right here. All right, I tried calling. Let me know when you're ready. This is live text messaging. I know this is the type of content the chat came here for. But we'll try to get reinforcements here. And so you don't have to listen to my voice for potentially 4 hours straight. Followed by another 4 hours straight. Followed by maybe even more time. But yeah, don't believe what the engine says here in the bingo. This is all theory at the moment. Mark says he touched the join button, but no response. Well, I'll try this one. See if he meant this one. I don't know. I don't know which room he joined. Chat, if you're hearing some ringing in the background, it is the beauty of the Discord calling someone message. proof that I am attempting to be a content creator, but trying, as Ben Feingold would say, is indeed the first step to failure. It's ringing. You're touching the green call button. This core doesn't like it. I have to say, the issues I had with Mark yesterday were something that I've seen many, many times when I've had different people trying to co-host with in the past. Because in my former universe, in the Gods Unchained world, I had I'm gonna try to get him to call me instead. Apparently, he doesn't want to get called. He might have accidentally blocked me after hearing my voices from the round 2 commentary, because he was on the round 2 broadcast with me. He might have blocked me because I would have wanted to do that. Let's see here. So all zeros in the opening here. Queen's off. A little bit of an awkward pawn structure for white. I like this from black's perspective. I know that, this b pawn is hanging after the move e6. So does Tom either need to play a3? I don't think you can give up the b pawn with check. I could be wrong. Yeah, he doesn't. He plays bishop to d2. I would have probably played a3 instead. Because I don't know if the bishop wants to be on d2. Like, you could go bishop to f4 and then maybe put the knight on d2. Because I'm trying to think of an idea for this knight, and this feels like a very fun idea. It can get kicked by b6, but it still feels like a very fun idea. Maybe put this knight on this square, and I don't know. Trying to figure out ideas for Tom's pieces here. The knight on c3 long term is like, it doesn't really have spaces to go. I guess you can go to c3 and you can go this way to get to c5 as well. But any updates here? So my guess is the time might be accurate between David and Josh, because how I was mentioning the 1 hour and 33 minutes sounded suspicious based on one move by David. And it looks like Josh might be falling a little bit behind here in the opening on the clock. I think we're getting his clock transmission, because we see David under 1 hour and 21 minutes now. He says, "You're touching the call button next to my name. It does nothing." That is strange. I've never seen that bug before. Yeah. Let's see. Is there another voice thing I could have Mark on? Why hasn't Josh played a move? Josh has played moves. I've gotten a text from the venue that they're having DGT issues with that game. So that board currently is not transmitting moves. So we are in the dark on the Generals game. Tell everyone iPad doesn't work with Discord. See if the company wakes up. I am sure that Apple has never worked with Discord before. It is early on a Sunday, so I doubt that anyone from Apple would want to wake up. Fog of War. The only thing we know is that David Luscombe is ahead 13 minutes on time, which is very rare because the general has been ahead on the clock in most of his games, including round number 1, where he ended the game with 1 hour and 19 minutes on his clock, had over a 1 hour time advantage on Arya in a game that he won. I really have no feel for this position in the Ryan Tom game. This structure is absurd to me, and the engine is like knight h6, which makes no sense to me. I would understand a knight g7 or a bishop e7. Knight h6 I don't understand. I guess the idea is that you want to go to f5 and pressure this d4 pawn. But it would be much more instinctual to play knight f6 for me. Knight e7 makes sense. That knight had to go somewhere. If he went knight a6, threatening this pawn, it would have been shored up by a3. And then there would not have been great squares to go to. But he could have rerouted from there to there to there. But that would be a long journey. I think both Brian and Tom are going to have a lot of time this game to do weird knight journeys, because this doesn't feel like a position where either side has a lot of short-term pressure. But I could be underestimating the situation. Completely zeros out of the opening for Ryan here is super solid with the black pieces, though. And as I stated before, that when you play the Binko, the engine says mean things to you, 1.2. But then as you see some just very natural moves played, these are all very normal. Very normal move. The engine starts to warm up to you a little bit. This is all expected. The engine does not understand the Binko. But humans, in a more practical sense, when humans play it, usually it ends up being closer to equal. And Mark just told me in Discord chat, white just looks like he has all dark square pawn weaknesses, all black pieces can't find outpost. I think that he's probably referring to this game. Yeah, he's got a couple of places here, and black's pieces, I feel like black's pieces can find good squares for sure. This bishop here, I think the dark square bishop for black might short term have issues, but maybe it can come to f6 and pressure here, and then we can pressure this way. I'm getting asked what my chess.com... Wait. I don't know my chess.com username. I'm getting asked my chess.com username. I don't know why I'm getting asked my chess.com username, chat. We might be finding an alternative solution for the Josh Alexander game. So, Ryan also agrees that the knight post on f5 and potentially g4 here could be problematic in the long term, this bishop can go. Yeah, bishop can go to d6 as well. That's another option. I feel like that bishop d2 from Tom says it looks kind of okay, but unless you're gonna route your knights like this, then you probably have to waste a move and play a3 anyways to shore up this b4 pawn, because you can't. With queens off, I don't think you can give this pawn up. Willingly, I should say. But here, same position in the opening here. And General Zod is... There's more moves been played than this. Let's see here. Trying a video call with Mark instead of a voice call and seeing if that button will work. It looks like it has not worked. The buttons pop off but don't respond to touchscreen. Interesting. Let's see. Are you on the Discord app or browser? I know for my phone, the browser doesn't really work, but the app works great. All right, we're trying to do some tech support. So I'm getting an invite to a classroom on chess.com, which I did not know existed. I just looked at chess.com. My last game on chess.com was January 25th, 2025. So it's been 15 months since I've played on chess.com. The general did not win in round number 3. I'm probably one of the few chess players that plays more games live than online. More over the board games than online games, I should say. I guess I shouldn't be on this game when there's literally nothing happening. That would be bad commentating. Interesting, the engine does have a4 as an idea, and I kind of like that. a4, maybe the idea of going b5 and opening up this queen side a little bit. That is better than just... a3 just feels so passive. And I feel like Tom has a kind of unique opening approach in this game and wants to play something dynamic. We want to see how the streamer is doing in the tournament. Well, unfortunately, the streamer is having technical difficulties with his board. General Zod, we are not getting transmission from his game at the moment. And we do get the other 2 games, but we're not getting his game, unfortunately. We're looking for alternatives. Let's see here. I don't see an invite. Where should I look? Some behind the scenes stuff here. We're trying to, I think, come up with an alternative solution to get the moves from the Josh Alexander versus David Luscombe game. Get the chat their general. I have confirmation from the tournament that Josh is not currently in the tank on E4. He is at the tournament site. He is making moves. It's just they're not appearing on the board. So that is unfortunate. So Arya here will need to make actually it's Chuck's move here. So the engine is thinking like this. I would play Rook F to B8 here if this was a blitz game and I didn't have to think. I don't know if that's the best move. The knight might come in here. There's a lot of thematic ideas with an A4 and a knight B5 for white as well. These can be kind of slow maneuvering type of games. Black gambits a pawn, but has a lot of pressure on the queen side. Apparently, Google AI says that it's a common bug for not picking up a call in Discord on the iPad. Interesting. And trying to log in. Nope, that failed. What email is my chess.com associated with? Probably the old one. I'm logged in on my desktop already, but I got sent a link. So actually, I could just type in the link that he sent, right? That would be smart. Nope. Is anybody in chat genius with classrooms on chess.com by any chance? Troubleshooting some technology. I didn't even know they had classrooms on chess.com. Or what they are. Alright, I hit the classroom button. Now will something pop up? Ah, I got an invite. Wow, so like chess.com, it would be better if you had an invite like on the front page. Because there's no one's gonna find this button here. Alright, chat, we've got some moves. We have some moves here. Excellent. This is General Zod's game. Oh boy, I'm gonna get roasted by the chat. I am unable to flip the board. Am I able to? Okay, yeah. The board has been flipped. I think Mike is listening to me. But I'm unable to navigate the moves. Alright. I'm going to come up with a unique solution. Oh wait, no, he just gave me full control of the board. Excellent. So I have full control of this board. Black is General Zod, and white is David Luscombe, if anybody is curious. But here we go. We have the Alakine, as chat loved to see. It, you know, the general is undeterred from the struggles of yesterday. He's putting out the baiting his opponent to move their pawns forward. And David is like, I'll move all my pawns forward. Which is also my approach as well. And, well, whenever somebody plays the Alakine, it's just such an ugly looking opening aesthetically because you're just giving your opponent so much space. But theoretically, it's okay. E6, knight f3. This all looks super solid to me. And white has a lot of space in the opening. But we're going to strike back at the center and be like, you overextended. Now we're going to create weaknesses in your position. And king h1 to get off of this long-term diagonal, which is, I don't know, kind of busy at the moment. So we have action from the general's game. He has the black pieces here. And I'm going to assume that the time is right, that maybe the general is behind 30 minutes on time. That could also be transmitting incorrectly as well. I don't know. Zod is an Alakine defense expert. Indeed, chat has roasted him some. They've complimented him some. But he is not going to give up his opening after one tough game against Ryan Ambergy. Because, let's face it, a lot of people have tough games against Ryan. That's life. But the engine says, you know, solid opening here. Oh, wait, no, this isn't the... Can I... we're getting an incoming call. Hello, Mark. How you doing?
Hello, Mike.
Okay, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I'm
Can you
great.
Hear me?
Can you hear?
I can hear you kind of, but it goes in and out. My picture is covering part of the board. Indeed. Bam. Sorry, chat. I was showing the standings at the beginning of the stream, so I put my picture over there. But you are correct. So here's the position for the general here. Looks like an Alakine, probably standard. We're going blind on the engine on this game, which is unique. So sometimes that's fun. And okay, Mark has muted himself. Trying to see if we can get his microphone going.
Select standard.
There's not a lead checks link to the Josh Alexander game because this is the lead chess link and this is inaccurate, obviously, because more moves have been played than e4. And Mark, I heard you say like 2 words and then it just cut off. It said it's standard and then it just cut off. So I feel like you're probably going to say more than that. So Tom probably a little bit out of his prep right now. You can see by the time. He probably, my guess is he probably prepped up to around here. This e6 idea was probably something he was very familiar with. We can see here the time usage, both players familiar with this position. He knew about the intermezzo, which is very important to not be just down a pawn after the queens come off. And now after knight d7, we see Tom has been thinking for 20 minutes after this move, which is interesting. A lot of times you spend a lot of time to think on a move, and then you do something absolutely crazy, and it's not the best move. Oh well, actually, it feels like, all right, the timer was being deceptive because we have some more moves into this game. So after knight d7, knight f3 was played, and he did not spend 20 minutes. He spent 7 minutes on that move. Bishop d6, as Mark mentioned earlier, a natural square for the bishop. Bishop to c3. Knight h6, the idea of moving that knight to f5 or potentially g4. Looks like that white's going to be able to put that knight on g5 if they would like. g5 feels very natural because you put some pressure on that e6 square. You can castle and then put a rook on e1. And yeah, attack e6. So that would be an idea for Tom here. There's not too many weaknesses for Tom to attack in Ryan's position, but I do think that pawn on e6 is potentially a target. That being said, we might see an e5 break at some point. That though, do you want to relieve that tension? I'm unsure. Hello, who are you? I am not the General Zod. I am covering his games. This is the General's game right here. He has the black pieces taking on David Luscombe, who has the white pieces. Unfortunately, the Lichess or the DGT transmission is out, so we are getting moves from the site via this chess.com analysis board. Oh, Mark, were you trying to say something? Like you came in and then immediately came out. All right, we have some more moves here. So the knight d2, knight c7, knight getting rerouted this way. Knight c4, the queen. And you got to be careful in some of these. I've gotten my queen trapped in this before. Because after the knight moves, well, like right now, for instance, this queen is trapped. Queen has no squares to go to. So we are threatening a3, which would be a problem. Bishop a6 gives us the queen some escape squares, which is key. a3, and the queen will go back probably all the way to b8, I would imagine. I can hear some of Mark in the background, but unsure if he is talking.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you
Can
hear
you hear
me?
me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
So So whenever I'm white in the Banco Gambit, I always wonder how I'm going to make this extra Banco Gambit. I always wonder how I'm going to make this extra pawn work.
Yeah, it's really hard to
Extra pawn
prove
work.
that one extra pawn is a decisive advantage
Yeah,
because
it's
the
really hard
eval
to
bar says
prove
something,
one extra
but
pawn
from a human
is
perspective,
decisive
it's really
advantage.
hard to prove
Yeah,
much of anything
it's
out of that
really
opening.
eval bar says something, but from a human perspective, it's really hard to prove.
Mark, I can hear an echo from whenever I talk to you now. So I believe if you could turn off the sound on your Twitch,
Whenever I call
then that will
you
probably
now,
help with
so
the
I
echo.
really turn off the sound.
He's muted his microphone on Discord. But what I was saying was if you mute the sound on Twitch, because I believe you were watching the Twitch broadcast as well. So when I talk to you and you have the sound from the Twitch broadcast as well as the sound from the Discord, it echoes. And that would probably be unpleasant for some of the viewers, maybe. Sorry, chat, we're working out some technical issues here. Try to get the sound working right and have good, consistent sound throughout the game. The knight has come to g5 as we expected, and the knight has come to f5 as we expected. So, I believe in knight a6, knight b to d2, knight f5, knight g5, and the king will go to. Interesting that the worst of the three squares it could go to, or I guess it could go to 6 squares, but I would have probably gone with e7, and according to the engine, that's the worst square. It wants to go to f6. It says g6 is playable too. I guess the idea is you can't really take here because of rook e8, and that would be problematic. So you can't take the pawn because you lose the knight. That's a key line to know. So that means that king to g6 is playable in this position if you want the king on that square. King f6 is also playable. It's kind of weird to move the king up the board, but since we're kind of in an opening type of position, that is completely okay to do. Or not an opening, a position with queens off the board. It's early for me. I am still very, very early. All right. Let's see if we've got any new moves from the General's game. And we do indeed have new moves. So after king takes h1, we have f takes and d takes. So we're offering a queen trade right here. And this e-pawn could be a long-term weakness. Of course, White would say this e6 pawn could also be a weakness sometime as well. White has a little bit more space, but when you get this far advanced like this, a lot of times your pawns can be targets and you can create more weaknesses. You can always move a pawn forward, but you can never move one backwards. And when I say you always can move one forward, obviously you can't move this e6 pawn forward or this e5 pawn forward because they run into each other. And they just like to stare and look at each other rather than move. So Ryan elects to go with king f6. I think that's somewhat natural here. If you don't plan on playing e5 and opening up this bishop anytime soon, and you've got complete control of the break, then I feel like f6 is a solid square for the king. So queen comes to b8. And this queen comes to c2. So this is pretty natural stuff in the Binko. We might see, knight e5 is always the idea. I would expect like some e6 break at some point, but apparently right now is not the time because of bishop f4 pressuring this pawn. I think maybe the knight on c7 is making this e6 break not be super effective because the queen no longer covers the d6 square. And do you want to turn on the eval bar lines and classrooms? All right. So the e6 apparently not an idea in this position, but Chuck plays knight to e5. Another idea. These knights, I think, will probably just get traded off here. I think you pretty much have to. Retreating with this knight makes no sense. But, I mean, to me, if I'm white, I would just exchange and then exchange. And then try to make a claim that these exchanges are good because I have an extra pawn and you don't. You can even do things like bishop h6, which is fun. It kicks the rook. Black does not want to give up this bishop for this bishop. So, still early game here, but super solid position for white early on here. Black hasn't really accomplished many of the things that they want to accomplish out of the Binko. From my opinion, but back to live. b3. I don't like b3 from Arya here. It opens up this diagonal. It adds weaknesses to the position. I mean, I wonder after king or rook takes, if you can just go straight to knight b5. And this is very awkward with the bishop on this diagonal, the knight here. I mean, maybe we kind of can cover up, but I feel like that this might be creating some weaknesses for black to potentially exploit. And I think, Mark says b3 can be invaded. I don't like b3 at all. I think knight b5 here is just such a natural move. It forces bishop b7 or bishop d2. And then I think we can play knight d4. So sample line here, bishop b2, and then get this knight on d4. And I mean, we're pressuring this pawn right here. You can't really push it, otherwise you lose it. That being said, you can lose a pawn and be even on material. That being said, you don't want to ever give up the pawn that easily in these positions, unless you're getting a major concession like having this dark square bishop come off the board. But this is the type of position that black wants to have in the Binko out of the opening. So you can get this nice little knight post and on the board. Oh, this is the exact position that happened on the board. Very natural moves, knight b4. Bishop e2 gotta shore up that knight. And then knight to d4. It would just be hard to resist putting a knight there. Mark mentioned that instead of knight to d4, black can win a pawn by playing bishop takes c3. And that is true. But winning this pawn, I mean, I think that with this bishop here and ideas, I think that this is not as good for white. I mean, we're even on material, but you give up that nice dark square bishop. What I was saying before was You don't want to give the pawn back unless you're getting a concession from black. And giving this beautiful dark square bishop up is quite the concession. But that would get the pawn back. And the engine says the position is slightly good for black, but somewhat equal. This b3 pawn is always going to be weak and might be difficult for white to trade off as well. I agree with Chuck's approach, though. Chuck is like, I want to put my knight onto d4. Chuck entered today playing a gambit. Oh, by the way, this does win a pawn as well. The b3 pawn falls. There's no way to guard that. So, yeah, Mark mentions that f6 does block the diagonal in that other line that we were looking at. So, the line that wasn't played, but it could have been played. We take here, take here, take here. Maybe the queen moves. Knight b5. Takes. And then if the bishop moves, you can always play f6 to block the diagonal, but I mean, the bishop comes in this way. And this also would have been good for black because the knight comes here. But obviously, white did not have to play all those moves either. But I like this. I like this from black. We're coming in on this b3 pawn, and with the knight hitting the queen, we're inevitably going to get this pawn. Material will be even, but black will still have a lot of positional pressure, and this a3 pawn long term is going to be weak. Ideally. So definitely like that position from black's perspective. So here, knight g5, knight f6. This knight goes to f3. So I thought that this knight might have been going to b3 with the idea of going to c5. Instead, it's going to f3, and I don't know its next destination. I mean, are we thinking about going to e5? I'm not sure that quite works tactically, because if we take, actually, it does work tactically. I'll waste a move here, hypothetically. We can't do this line because at the end we have this knight fork. The crazy thing is the engine says this is equal. I guess the idea is that your active king is worth the exchange. I would not want to play this if I was Ryan, though. So it's always fun when you say that there's a trap, and then when you fall into a trap, you're not even really worse. So if Renato says if was 2200, why doesn't he have a title? So Lee Chess, this is showing FIDE ratings, and so Tom Bromlich is a national master in USCF, but does not have a FIDE title. We see here that Ryan Ambergy is an FM. So he has a FIDE title. Zod's game is right here. So we had f takes d5, d takes d5, knight d7 here. There is some technical issues on the transmission of his game that has led us to being on this chess.com board instead of the Lee Chess summary. So, one idea to keep him. This looks like a super solid position out of the Alkine for Josh. He has equalized with black and has a position that chat has mentioned that he's very comfortable playing, and he's very strong in this type of position. So that could mean good signs for the general this round after a very tough round number 3. I'm gonna go back to live. The line that I showed there was crazy, but what I did prove was that you can actually play knight to e5, for what that's worth. Ryan has played bishop to c7. I think he wants to reroute this bishop here, and he wants to put some pressure on this pawn right here. He also might be thinking about rerouting this knight, though I don't think the knight has much purpose on d6, because this d3 pawn takes away the e4 and c4 potential infiltration squares. So I think the knight's better on f5 than it would be on d6. Interesting that Ryan is attempting to relocate this bishop before relocating this knight or these rooks, because I feel like his bishop was probably a better piece than the knight or the rooks. And I'm unsure that the bishop is even better on this diagonal, because this bishop on d6 kind of was tying this bishop down to this pawn on b4. But I guess maybe this bishop will still be tied down. I think from Ryan's perspective, it's nice to have an attacking bishop instead of a defending bishop. So Zod is here. So this is the DGT board. It's not transmitting right. I'm not sure if these times are correct. I am going to assume they're not, because General Zod doesn't go down this much on time usually. From what I've seen, I mean, this much. And he had like over an hour left in round number 1. And considering he's playing an opening that he's very familiar with and very comfortable with, I would not expect this much of a time disadvantage 13 moves into the game. But that could be wrong. So I'm just assuming that all the DGT transmissions we're getting from that game are incorrect at the moment. He's played moves. We have the tournament director is in text messages with me on my phone, and he has kindly manually set up a chess.com classroom, and he is sending me the moves on here. So this is General Zod's game. General Zod has black in this position against David Luscombe and has a super solid position. Is still early in the opening here. Chances for a 3-result game. All the results possible for both sides. But yeah, we're early here. I would not buy into what the DGT time situation is. Isn't it White's turn? And in the last update that I got from the the tournament director, that is indeed the case. However, I mean, he's manually sending them the moves. It's not like being automated. So I get updates when they're convenient for him to make the updates. So Zod did not oversleep. Zod is out there fighting. He's playing. The DGT board Zod is playing on did oversleep, though. The DGT board he is on said, no, I do not work on Sundays. It is against that board's, I guess, religious belief. So DGT boards are allowed to have religious convictions as well, I guess. I did not know this, but apparently they do. Does not work on Sunday. But yeah, I would not trust the time situation here either, because that's very suspicious. I got I got a text from Mike. Um, White 56 minutes, black 1 hour and 9 minutes. Um, so General Zod is actually ahead on the clock by 13 minutes in this position. It is White's move. So the general is not doing terrible on time. He's actually ahead on time, despite what the DGT board is saying. Let's see here. Chris is asking me for the link that Mike sent me. I wonder if I can post this in chat. If I post this in chat, will it work? Will it work for the chatters? I think it's invite only, so it's going to be behind an invite wall. But I'm curious if chatters can view General Zod's game from that link. Let's see here. All right, Mike sent me an invite on Classrooms. I'm not sure that anyone can view with a link and no invite. Yeah, I don't think that. I'm not sure. There might be a technological solution here, but I could be failing at that. I have failed to get Mark Halsey online consistently. We've had just a little bit of him on the broadcast. And I have failed to have the DGT classroom thing set up correctly. However, if everything went absolutely smoothly, then you would think that this broadcast was very, very well prepared and that I didn't just roll out of bed this morning and then start talking into a microphone, which is exactly what has happened. So, yeah. We're trying our best here. But at least now we do have all the games. Ignore this time situation. We have confirmation from Mike that Josh is actually ahead on time and David is not up nearly an hour. I wonder if I refresh. Okay, I'm scared to refresh. I'm afraid to break things. Actually, I could refresh because I can get back here. Yeah, it's the same link. The thing is I think I'm going to send this. It would send the same link regardless. Right? Yeah, it would send the same link regardless. So after bishop c7, Tom's gone into the tank here. Trying to come up with a plan. I like a4. It's the number 3 computer move, but it's the number 1 move in my heart. The engine wants to play rook b1, but I want to play a4. G3 just looks bad. I guess G3. So if he plays A4, can we play knight to H4 here? No, we can't, because you can take back with the rook. Never mind. I was thinking if you took with the knight, we had king takes knight. But you would also have this intermezzo of knight E6, so we wouldn't be accomplishing anything there. Let's see here. Chuck has infiltrated the position here. We have the knight coming to D4, which I loved. Queen coming to D3, and we can come in and attack this B3 pawn. And that is exactly what has happened. Rook to B1, trying to get some play right here. Knight C2 would be a hard move for me to play. I would probably thinking more about retreating this queen. Like, I would naturally want to play something like queen to B7 here and just give up a majority of my advantage. Not the best engine move, but I'm worried about getting my queen trapped. Even though it's not super close to getting trapped, but the bishop moves we're on it here. Maybe better to just contest the open file.
But how?
Even though it's super close to getting trapped, but the bishop moves we're on it here. Maybe better to just contest the open file. Okay, I can hear you, Mark, but I also hear an echo. So I'm unsure if maybe the same sound that you're getting from my Discord is also getting picked up. So that echoes. But that would be a failure of Apple's noise suppression system, which they should have. Very basic thing for them.
So I was just saying that if Black's queen is on B3, I mean, what Pete is going to attack it. The rook B1 might, but then bishop to C1, and then you have queen to C2. So it just doesn't look bad. In fact, you even have queen takes C3, queen takes back on C3, and then knight E2. Oh, that's not the key. Move the king to F1.
Yeah.
So that you don't have that knight fork. But you still have queen C2, so it's not really trapped.
Yeah, I think I was just getting a little bit panicked because I see the rook on this open file, and we can't go here, we can't go here, we can't go here. So I get a little bit scared, but queen C2 seems to be a very safe square and doesn't seem to be getting trapped anytime soon. I guess there's not really a way for white to threaten it. I guess he can play rook C1, but that might be playing for cheapos. Though if you play rook C1, the bishop needs to go to C1 to threaten the queen, because otherwise the queen can take on A3. So yeah, maybe like a rook B8 here would be kind of natural for black. Just try to counteract the pressure. Fight on the queen side, and this is going to be a very difficult position for white, I believe.
I like that move.
I mean, we're getting very close to threatening tactics with. I'm going to waste a move, but like threatening tactics here, where maybe we can take here, and like hypothetically, if this happened, you could maybe give up the queen, but maybe this would not be as good. I thought this was a good idea at the time because I was getting two rooks, but maybe this is not as good of an idea as I originally thought. Yeah, the engine disagrees, but some potential ideas. Of course, you've got to evaluate that stuff. Okay, we see a C4 break, which is very interesting from Chuck. I don't hate this. It's very committal. A lot of times when I play c4, I want to put a knight onto c5. Though there isn't a super quick way to reroute this knight to c5. And quite frankly, it's completely fine on d4. All right. So this does pose the question to the queen. I think queen d1 is very natural. If you're white, I think getting material off the board and stabilizing the position. The one thing that c4 does is it gives white something to target. So before it, black's pawn structure was just super solid. There were no real holes. Black had their pawn back after they won the b3 pawn back. And it feels like that black has a lot of pressure for no compensation. And this a3 pawn is a long-term weakness. Now, black still has a lot of pressure, and there's very little compensation. But the a3 pawn weakness long-term might be offset by the fact that the c pawn might also be weak long-term. Or it could be very strong long-term if you're able to plant a knight on a square like b3, or a lot of options here for black. But I think if you're playing the bingo as black, this is the type of position you want to see. Go ahead and check to see how Ryan and Tom are doing. They're in a pretty good battle here. So Tom thought for a long time, and he played g3, which is actually one of the top engine moves. I didn't like it aesthetically. We do shore up this h4 pawn. We're preventing any ideas of the bishop coming into f4. And we're not super concerned about the weakness of our light squares because there is no light square bishop for black. So the light squares are hard to exploit. And there are no real obvious entry squares. It's also hard to reroute a knight to target the g4 square. I guess you could always do this, but I also like this knight on f5, so I'm not really sure if we've accomplished anything by doing that. It'll be interesting to see what type of plan Ryan comes up with. a5 is completely natural to me. If these exchange, then you get a nice open file for your rook. You've activated your rook. But, I mean, Tom might counter back with an open b file as well. So this looks to be a... I mean, the eval bar says it's all zeros, but there's enough imbalance in this position that it's still a 3 result type of a game because it's not symmetrical, and there should be opportunities for both sides. Yep, rook f8. I like this from Chuck. He's not concerned about the queens coming off because hypothetically, if you do queen takes, the rook comes here, and I mean you can consider rook b8. This a pawn is going to be super weak. This knight is just incredibly strong. It feels like everything is going the way that black would like it to go. You can even consider lines like the knight coming to f3, which threatens knight d2 and also threatens knight h2. I'm not even sure that h pawn is even worth going for, but that would be one option that Chuck would have. And it's very natural to want to resolve the tension if you're white when you kind of feel on the defensive and having a hard time playing moves. The number one engine move is f4. That might be a hard move to play because you're moving a pawn right in front of your king. That being said, it doesn't really feel like a kingside attack is going to be the primary plan for black in this position. I haven't looked at chat in a while, so sorry about that. M. Lewis says, "Is the clock broken, or is Zod in the think tank? You've seen him play down on time before in rapid, but not classical." We have confirmation from the tournament site. I got a message a few minutes ago that Zod is up about 13 minutes on the clock, so he is ahead on the clock. You don't understand Arya's 19b3. I agree, Jab Chess. That was I think this was kind of the turning point in the game. I feel like Arya's position is completely fine right here. In fact, I feel like that White has a lot of the things that you'd want from White's side of the Binko. Immediately after b3 happens, there's just so many weaknesses, and I feel like that Black has the better position here. So I agree that b3 is kind of the turning point and the mistake that has really put Arya in a lot of trouble in this game. I think everything else that's happened in that game since is kind of the snowball effect from that mistake. So there's no DGT feed for Josh's game. This is completely inaccurate, by the way. We do have chess.com. I am getting moves from the tournament director on site here. And we last saw Josh play knight d7, and David has played bishop f4. So General Zod has the black pieces in this game, and he is taking on David Lupscomb. This is a key move. Oh, we have a lot of people who have joined this room. That is pretty cool. So did the link that I send work, or are people getting in? This is Zod's game. He has black. So we have people getting into the room. I thought it was a private classroom, but maybe the link that I sent worked. Because we have people in here and they are chatting. So that is potentially good. Excellent. Special Agent Bill joined through my link. I know Chris Ambergy was asking about that as well. Chatter says I'm lying. That is super common. Excellent. The tournament director has opened this room up, so it is public. General Zod is indeed the black pieces. And neither side is in time trouble, but I'm sure later in the broadcast we might get updates if one side is struggling there. But just an FYI, this time we see on the DGT board is inaccurate. No Alekine, what a relief. You are incorrect. This has definitely been an Alekine. We'll go ahead and start from the beginning. Knight f6. He has played the Alekine. The chat thought that he wouldn't. They thought that he would be a little bit sad from the tough loss last round against Ryan. And he has played an Alekine. But he has played it well this time. There has been no opening blunders. There has been no mixing up his lines. He has gotten a good position here. It looks like the engine hates King h1. I don't understand King h1 from a strategic standpoint, because a lot of times you play King h1 when you've done f-pawn stuff, because you're worried about like Queen b6 or Bishop c5 and pressure on that diagonal. Neither Queen b6 or Bishop c5 is a threat in this position, so I do not understand King h1 either. The engine disagrees with that move as well, says that's a wasted move, and there goes White's opening advantage. And since then, engine actually says that Black has a slight pull here, and I feel like that General Zod probably has a very good feel for what to do in this type of position, while David might be struggling to navigate. I know as an e4 player myself, I don't face the Alekine very much. I would not be super familiar with what to do from a strategic standpoint in this situation. And as General Zod, as many people have mentioned, is an expert on this type of opening, he's probably very comfortable in this position. This is round 4 of 5. There will be one more round after this round. That round will start at 2:30 p.m. or approximately 3 hours and 30 minutes from now. But we still have a lot of action this round. This is a 3-result game. I feel like the Ryan Tom game is super close. I don't really feel like either side has an edge. I do like this A5 break by Ryan here to attempt to have some play here on the A file. And I think that Chuck is in a great position to potentially get his first point of the tournament. So I have another text from the tournament director. The current time is the general has about 60 minutes left, 59 minutes, 57 seconds, and white has 47 minutes, 12 seconds from the text that I have. So right now, the general is up approximately 13 minutes on time. Ignore what this says, where the general is about to lose on time. The DGT board is incorrect. So, knight c5 is interesting. Offering the queen trade. Will David accept, or does he want to keep queens on? I feel like a lot of times when you do some of this f4, you know, I guess both sides have the open F file, so that's kind of contested. But usually the side that opens the F file wants to keep queens on so they can launch an attack. But both sides are kind of symmetrical there. Pawns are all staring at each other as well. So not like a completely symmetrical pawn structure because obviously white has committed forward more. And black is super solid with 5 of their 6 pawns in the starting square and one of them that's just gone 1 square forward. So that means that long-term, white will probably have more positional weaknesses to attack. At least that's the hope for the player who's playing the Alekhine, who immediately brings their pony out early so it can get harassed by pawns. Just always, the thing about the Alekhine is I'm amazed that it's even a playable opening. Because you're just wasting so much tempi, it feels like, giving white, after e4, like, to me, you're giving them one free move. And then like they could immediately play c4 if they wanted, but after they play c4, that's another free move. And they can even like play c5 here if they want, but it just feels like white gains a couple of free moves in the opening, and you're giving white, who's already basically a tempo up, 2 free moves. It feels like it should be a worse opening than it is. But apparently white is overcommitted. Sod blunder. It's not a blunder. This is completely fine. Zod has not won all of his games. He's got 2 points out of 3. He lost to Ryan Ambergy in round number 3. If you can check the pinned messages and get to the lead chess. If you're curious about any of the past rounds games, you can hit this button. You can go to either round 1, round 2, or round 3. And if you're curious about the game that Zod lost, it is indeed this game right here. You can play through it. You can click through the entire game if you would like. Oh, you turned off the engine and it was your analysis. Yeah, it was not quite a blunder though. Your analysis is, unless your analysis is better than the engine, and if your analysis is better than the engine, then you should be taking on Magnus Carlsen right now in the not World Championship. Because Magnus is half retired. But it'll be interesting, will David decide to trade queens or not? I feel like he kind of almost Have to trade queens here. It's just so natural. Though the engine, it's not one of the top 3 computer moves. So the engine hates trading queens. I would have traded queens and I would just be much worse. What's wrong with the round 4 DGT? Well, 2 of the 3 boards are working. But unfortunately, the Generals board is not working. But we do have, the tournament director has kindly given us these broadcasts. I need to be careful making moves on this board because I just realized that it's not sublines, it's actual lines. So I need to let Mike make the moves on the board and just, yeah, we don't need to be doing anything theoretical or just delete it immediately after. So he shouldn't be. So we learned here that David shouldn't trade queens, though I might trade queens. It's allowing white space. In exchange, black hopes to chip away at the pawn structure later. Overextending is a weakness philosophy. Why isn't the board working? I mean, I'm just a person in a studio apartment in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who is not at the tournament site. So I don't know why. I can't give you answers. Wow, the 2400 is strong. Yeah, most 2400s tend to be pretty good at chess. That's one thing. I've played some 2400s in the past, and let's just say there was one in the what is it? There was one from Tennessee that none of you have probably ever heard of, Ronald Burnett, who was an IM, and I think I've played him in 3 chess games. And in all 3 chess games, I managed to not have a competitive chess game. So I can tell you firsthand that 2400s are very difficult. Zod's opponent is really bad. What is it? Zod's opponent is 2150. He's not really bad. I've played David before. David to me has, from my experience, and I could be wrong here, he's been very up and down. Like the first time I played him, he completely blew me off the board. And the second time I played him, I completely blew him off the board. So they were very drastic experiences. So we've played twice. So yeah, General Zod is 2158, and David Luscombe is 2150. So there's an 8 rating point difference. So that's 8 rating points. All right, we have some moves here, I think. After knight c5, instead of queen d8, we have bishop e3. Okay, I think what I'm going to do here is instead of making this a subline, I'm going to promote it. All right, there. Blew each other. There was a lot of blowouts. So bishop to e3, letting the tension remain in the position. Makes more sense than me just wanting to eagerly trade off queens. There are no easy games in this tournament, by the way, chat. Everyone in this tournament is above 1,000. It's above 2,000. Technically, what I said was correct, because they all are above 1,000. They're also all above 2,000. So there are none. And Arya here spent a lot of time, ended up playing queen c1. This is just a very difficult position to play from the white pieces. I think he was worried about maybe exchanging and then maybe the knight coming, doing stuff like this. Why did he play b3? I don't know. I can't explain. I can't explain b3. Like b3 is not a move. Yeah, I can't explain that. I mean, it's the key blunder in this game, and I can't even explain the logic of why you play b3 here. Just feels I can't explain that. Don't try to get me to explain things I can't understand. He never wanted bishop c4. Like black's never playing bishop c4 because this bishop is guarding is guarding c4.
I think Arya was trying to get rook b1 over to protect b3.
Then why not play rook b1 first, and then maybe you can play b4 in one move, like hypothetically. I just opening with b3 there just didn't feel great because you just immediately were pinning yourself. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know what his ideas were behind it. It's very easy, I will say this to all the chatters and to us sitting here. It's very easy for us to just roast a particular move when we see the eval bar move, but you know it's difficult in live chess because you do not have the eval bar and you do not know how bad a potential idea is. Yeah, it could have been a move. Chat mentioned here. It could have been a move to prevent pawn to c4. So if he was worried about c4 happening, and then maybe from there, like I like to sometimes plan a knight on c5 if I can, though with the structure of this bishop on a6, this knight doesn't really have a path to c5. So I wouldn't have been mega concerned in this particular position about that, but yeah, maybe some long-term stuff he was thinking and just really underestimated the power of this pin. Oh, white played b3 to play bishop c4. Just got here. I know people have asked what's up with Zod's board. So Zod, his DGT transmission is not correct. So we have confirmation from the site that this time is incorrect. Zod is ahead about 13 minutes on the clock. And we have General Zod's board right here. For those of you in chat who want to watch his game live, this link might work, or it might not. I can pin this message. I could, but would that affect the other pinned message? I will pin it for 180 minutes. There we go. Timer must be between 30 seconds and 30 minutes. I can only pin it for 30 minutes. Jeez. That is mean. Zod never down on time. Zod is indeed not down on time here, apparently. But yeah, he's got the black pieces here against David Luscombe. And that's all you need to know. We're getting these submitted manually from the tournament director on site. And we have some moves here in the Ryan Ambergy game. We saw a5. I like this idea here, trying to open up and create pressure with this pawn break. King to d2, which I do not understand, but is one of the top engine moves. Maybe there's some lines with the bishop coming in here where you like to have the king on d2 covering up c3, and then after the king takes back on c3, it's guarding the d4 pawn. I think Zod has gained about 20 points from the first 3 rounds, I believe. I did the rating estimator, and if he were to win all of his games, he would end up with a 2196. All remaining games. So if he won, if he beat David Luscombe and he beat Chuck Unruh in round 5, he would get 2196. He cannot reach National Master after his loss against Ryan Ambergy, but he could reach it, in the next tournament after this for sure. He's definitely up there. He's gained rating points so far this event with 2 points out of 3. He doesn't lose much when he loses to Ryan Ambergy because he's over 2,400. So not a bad loss. So King D2, A takes, B takes, and Rook to A4. I like this idea. He's going to double his rooks. He's going to apply some pressure here. And then even if you shore up with A3, you have Bishop to A5 ideas, and it feels like that Ryan is trying to generate some sort of pressure and imbalance in this game. Nah, these ratings are FIDE ratings. So Josh Alexander's USCF rating is 2158. So he started the tournament 42 points away from Master. He had a victory against a 2200 and a victory against a player who was a little bit above 2000 as well. And lost to Ryan Ambergy, who is above 2400. So these are FIDE ratings. Bromwich is 2200 USCF. Ambergy is 2425. And both Chuck and Arya are above 2000. You hope he gets NM so he can play entitled tournaments. I'm unsure. So, for those of you in chat, how does Titled Tuesday work? If you get the NM title, or it's not even necessarily a title, it's like USCF. Does chess.com honor National Master as a title for Title Tuesday, or do you need to get the FIDE Master title? So Zod's real name is Josh Alexander, but this board is incorrect. This board has errors. So we have the pinned message in the chat, and this is the game that we have going here. Bishop E3 is the last game. National Master counts. Okay, I did not know that. WCM has the lowest requirement as well. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what rating that would be. Because I know the Botezes are around, 2000, and they've got the double WFM title. So WCM, is that going to be like 17, 1800-ish? $2,000 FIDE for WCM? I feel like that doesn't feel right. That feels like for CM, not WCM. I could be wrong. Because I know, well, I guess chat is correcting me. 2000 FIDE is tough. That's harder than 2000 USCF. I feel like WCM. I don't know. I'm gonna Google this. I'm questioning chat. All right. WCM title is the lowest ranking female only title awarded by FIDE, introduced in 2002. Requirements primary include achieving a classical FIDE rating of 2000 or higher. Okay. Wow, that's surprising. But 2000 FIDE is hard to get. So what are the requirements CM title in chess? Okay, so CM is 2200. WCM is 2000. Okay. Because in like USCF, we consider 2200 to be national master, not candidate master. But it's easier to get 2200 USCF than 2200 FIDE as well. 2100, 2200, 2300. Okay. So, I mean, 2000 FIDE is. I mean, a lot of people probably have 2000 FIDE. They are probably um, like close to 2200 USCF. Those are kind of close to each other. Mark Halsey chatted me. He says he gets invites for Title Tuesday on chess.com. FIDE was hard to get in the US. FM is 2300. Yeah. So, that's cool. So, if you've ever achieved National Master, you get the invites on Title Tuesday. So that's pretty awesome. I have not achieved any of that, so I do not get invites. Leaked IP address. That's life. What's my rating or title? So I'm like 1900 now. My peak rating was about 2040-ish, and then we've struggled since recently. So I had the unofficial USCF title of expert, though it's not even a real title. It's just kind of like unofficial. And then I lost it because I kept losing chess games. I can still get an NM. I have beaten an NM. I've beaten a few. My record against NMs isn't pretty, but I have a few W's. I guess for most people around 1900 to 2000, they don't have a very good record against 2200s. That would probably be pretty normal. If I had a really good record against 2200s, my rating would probably be higher. I think we're getting moves into other games. Probably should check them out. All right, we've had some action here. So Queen C1, Queen C2. I don't know. It is very awkward though after the exchanges, because after the exchanges we have here, you can't really go up because of potential long-term tactics. I guess that would only win a pawn though, but maybe winning a pawn will be enough. So rook e to c1. I think we can take here on a3 if we would like. Is there any reason why I cannot do this? There's a reason why I can't do this. Why can't I do this? Ah, knight takes b1 and then I guards the bishop. See, chat, I found a way to blunder. So we can't grab the pawn. Takes, and then you got this in between move. So both ways have a different in between move which wrecks it. Special Agent Bill would blunder that. Excellent. I'm not the only one who would blunder it. I'm just here for educational purposes, just in case there's some lower rated players in the chat looking for what not to do. I am showing you potential blunders that you could easily make in your games, so you will not repeat those blunders in your own. I'm just doing it for content and educational purposes. But I think maybe he could go this way, right? Could he win a pawn this way? Chat doesn't like this, or Engine doesn't like this. Engine says this is okay though. Yeah, look, this is fine. So we found a way to win a pawn, but he's got this nice dark square bishop, and we've got to approve this ending. This could be a drawn ending. I don't know. It feels like when I'm in a bad mental state after watching the candidates tournament because it felt like every ending where it was just the difference of a pawn was drawn. But when I play chess games, if you're up a pawn in an ending, you're usually winning. And the candidates is they're very good at holding those endings. While I don't feel like people rated around 2000 are. It's amazing that 2800s or 2700s are better at holding pawn down endings than 2000s. I don't know. That feels like a scam. Yeah, this C pawn, it's either the best pawn or the worst pawn for Chuck, and we'll find out later. Because it can be a weakness or it could be the pawn that wins you the game. Right now it looks pretty strong because there's no immediate way to attack it. But I think right now Chuck is calculating all the things that I was showing on the board, like bishop takes knight. Does he want to go up? Does he want to go in this pawn up ending? Bishop takes knight is very forcing and can guarantee a pawn up ending. Or does he want to maybe do something else? All right, we have some moves in this game. So after this, I like the doubling here. He put his king onto c3, which is interesting. The engine likes knight takes d4. The idea being that if you take, this is problematic. And you're threatening c5 as well. So you get the pawn back, but this looks very complicating. So we can't take here because of this hitting here, and that would be bad. Though you can play here, right? Just a waiting move works. All right. Well, none of that happened. I just thought that was interesting. So the engine goes up to -1 because knight takes d4 is a really strong engine move. But that's hard to actually do. Mark Halsey mentioned that black is always better in the Binko Gambit endings. I think if black can get to the ending where they're not down a pawn, that is true. I have played the Binko and been down a pawn in a Binko ending, and
Miles,
lost.
doesn't black just have pawn to b6 and then pawn to c5?
Which game are you talking about? Oh, in this one here, b6, c5.
Game we're talking about. Oh, in this.
Yeah, I can definitely see that here. So the doubling of the rooks is probably
in the
gonna
Amber D
go to
game.
a3.
Yeah, I can definitely see that here. So the doubling of.
I'm getting an echo, but yeah, I agree that we're most likely going to see a3 to kind of shore this bishop down. The awkward thing about playing a3 here is this bishop is starting to get very trapped. So I do like the idea that Mark just mentioned, b3, with the idea of playing c5, but apparently the engine does not like this as much, but I don't know why. Like, what's wrong with this? Oh, blundered mate in 1. That is sneaky. I did not notice that. You can get mated in the middle of the board. That is cute. So we have to be slightly careful here. b6. So after rook e1, this is a legitimate threat. I thought that I could just win a piece and then I checkmate and I move, but no, it's checkmate. You can't move after checkmate.
When white
Yep.
plays rook h to e1, you do have to watch e6 like right then and there.
It looks like, okay, rook h, e1 is on the board. So he has played this. Tom is threatening checkmate. Ryan will see it, but how does he respond to this threat? Because there's not really a comfortable move here if I am Ryan. I mean, the engine says rook e8 is the only move that equalizes, but it's really hard to play rook e8 after you just played rook a8. Just from a psychological
There's nothing
standpoint.
wrong with rook e8.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just hard to play psychologically. Because you just moved the rook from h8 to a8, and now you're moving it from a8 to e8. When you could have gone from h8 to e8 in one move. I think that I struggle with that more than most players. I don't like to move the same piece on back-to-back moves because I feel like I'm admitting a concession that my prior move was a bad idea. It's the only move. It's not hard.
It never seemed to bother world champion Petrosian.
Unfortunately, I'm not world champion for Trojan. So we have our own flaws. But yeah, it is the best move. Chat is pointing out that it is the only move. It is the only move to maintain equality for black. So great find by Tom here to apply the pressure, ignoring the doubled rooks on the A file, not committing a move with the A pawn, and instead threatening checkmate and making Ryan play defensively, which is good because I feel like a lot of people, when they're facing a player like Ryan who is above 2,400, you psychologically get in kind of this defensive shell, and Tom is currently not in that. He is applying some pressure here and not just playing for a draw. Okay, we've had some developments here. All right, knight c2, rook e to c1. We see the bishop being taken here. Rook takes c2. So we can exchange everything and just be up a pawn. So hypothetically, if you want, you can play this ending from black's perspective. You're up a pawn, but this might be theoretically drawn because people say all rook and pawn endings are drawn.
But all rook and pawn endings are drawn.
But not all of them are. But this one probably, with perfect play, would be drawn, I think. Perfect play is much easier said than done, though. But Chuck keeps the tension. He moves his bishop back to g7. And now white has a very awkward position. You can't move this rook off of the b2 bishop. You can't move this rook off of the b2 bishop, otherwise you lose the bishop. You can't move the bishop because the rook would hang with the check. So right now, Arya can't really move. And that's not fun for him. This feels like Chuck might have time to do like a rook a7, rook b7 type of idea as well. And maybe find a way to win the bishop. And if he wins the bishop, he wins the game. Chat asking for a new move in Zod's game. And there have been multiple moves in Zod's game. We see bishop to e3. Knight to d7. Going to go ahead and reroute that knight. bishop to f4. So we see kind of an implicit draw offer, though. Okay. We see a move repetition here, so another implicit draw offer, and then maybe he was bluffing, but he got David to play a worse move according to the engine. And now his knight comes into d3, which I liked until I saw what the engine said. The engine can sometimes be annoying. And I'm wondering, for knight d5, why can't I take on b2? Or is this just queen b3 and we're hitting the b7 pawn? It's probably that simple. Actually, no, I'm getting my knight trapped. Oh, wait. Oh, I need to not make analysis boards here. Correct. Okay, knight c5 played. So, interesting. Knight c5, by the way, the number one computer move. One thing I'm going to point out about General Zod here is we have knight d7. All right, so he moved his knight to d7, and then after bishop d4, he moved his knight to c5. After bishop d3, he moved his knight to d7. After bishop f4, he moved his knight back to c5. After bishop g3, he moved his knight to d3. After knight d5, he moved his knight to c5. He has moved the same knight on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consecutive moves. That is... Usually it's not a good sign when you move the same knight 6 times in a row. I mean, the position says, according to the engine, that it's even. I mean, the knight started on this square, went to this square, went here, went back to here, went back to here, went here, went back to here. So Zod is playing black. I don't understand. Is he going for some sort of Guinness Book of World Records for most consecutive moves with the same knight in the middle of the game?
Miles, do you think that the general is playing with David Luscombe's psychology? Because David does not like quitting games. I mean, if you play 3 moves in a row, the game is over. And David is like, no, I want to play 60 more moves. Yeah. And so if you do this back and forth thing, you're kind of asking David to maybe make the move that is not his favorite.
Well, I think we did see him accomplish exactly what you said. So he said, so all right, David played bishop to f4, and then on knight c5, we see bishop to e3, asking the question. Then he just moved back, and then David moved back. And then when he did the implicit draw offer with this knight to c5, David moves his bishop to g3, which before he moved his bishop to e3, which was the move I think he wanted to play, but he didn't want the draw, so he played bishop to g3 just to play something different. And according to the engine, this was worse. However, the engine wanted this to play queen to e8 and then rook to d8. Was the general idea, but the general did not find that. I don't understand knight to d3. It's a very weird move. And interestingly, knight d5 is the number one engine move. With the idea that if you take this knight is hanging. So this is... Oh, I need to... I gotta be careful. I don't want to mess up this game because we're getting. It's not very good for analysis. This setup, unfortunately, and so I don't want to mess up the games the moves we're actually getting. So, yeah, basically now we're threatening this knight, and now knight takes e7 is a very natural move for David to play, especially if he's wanting to avoid kind of repetition stuff, trading the knight for the bishop. He can kind of claim that he's making some sort of progress. Though this position currently looks very equal, and it feels like that the general is probably okay with the draw here from just the moves that he's played. He's at least had an implicit draw offer, And David seems to want to play this for another 3 hours. All right, knight to d4 was just played. What score is everyone on? Okay, chat has asked that. I will answer that. So right here, these are the scores entering this round. Ryan Ambergy with a perfect 3 out of 3. He has wins over the two players who are currently in second, who are playing right now. The general, Joshua Alexander, is facing off with David Luscombe. They both have 2 points out of 3, with their only loss being to Ryan Ambergy. Tom Bromwich, who is playing Ryan right now, has 1.5 out of 3. Arya has a... Earlier in the broadcast, I said 0.5 out of 3 because I was trying to reach my word count, but a half a point out of 3. And Chuck is still looking to get on the scoreboard. However, on the actual game board right now, he has a great position. So, hopefully from his perspective, he can get on the board. All right, I'll move my camera back here. All right, here. So we've got some moves played in this game, and it looks like Chuck won a bishop. We'll go back in time to see exactly how this was accomplished. Oh, it's just a blunder. It's actually not a blunder according to the engine. It's the number one computer move. But when the number one computer move is just giving up a bishop and going into an ending down an entire bishop, I don't like this from a practical standpoint. I don't see any way that Chuck doesn't convert this and get his first win of the tournament. It's just a full bishop for this one a-pawn, but this a-pawn is not worth an entire bishop. So I am pretty confident that Chuck will finally get on the board in this event. All right, we have some moves in this game. After the checkmate in 1 threat, which I missed, Ryan does not miss checkmate in 1. He plays rook to e8, guarding it, which was the number one computer move. And a super solid move by Tom, activating his king, threatening the rook. And Ryan retreats the rook. And this position, according to the engine, is even, but there are still a lot of pieces on the board and a lot of imbalances, and there will be a lot of chess left in this game. What happens? What's the idea of bishop to e4? Zod's game, okay. I'm confused. All right, so we have some move in Zod's game here. Knight to e7. We see the exchange. Knight to d4. And bishop to e4. So the idea is he doesn't want this knight to trade for the bishop. He wants to keep this bishop on the board so that, like, if this knight traded for the bishop, then David would have 2 bishops and Zod would have 2 knights. Some people think that's an advantage for the bishops. Depends on the position. But he's worried about, he doesn't want his opponent to have 2 bishops, basically. So that's the idea behind bishop to e4. He could have played bishop to g6, but I think he thought that e4 was a more active square. And this position seems somewhat equal. I also think that another sub-idea of bishop to e4 is that it guards the knight on c6, so that if this knight exchanges here, you can play bishop takes c6. While if you played bishop to g6, after knight c6, you're doubling your pawns and giving a potential long-term weakness for David to exploit. And honestly, not even that long-term. After knight takes, pawn takes, bishop to f3, you would already be right on that diagonal, hitting that pawn, and then you could do queen a4 ideas, hitting that square. So I think bishop to e4 was a very pragmatic choice by the general. Why not trade and activate your rook? So yeah, you could have done knight takes, knight, I think that would have been completely fine. So yeah, the number one engine move is knight takes d4 and leaving this bishop here. I think maybe you're worried about the queen getting in the middle of the board, but yeah, rook d8 would have been completely natural. So I don't know. Maybe he thinks that after bishop e4 that he's going to play knight takes, and then after bishop takes c6, the bishop on this diagonal will be very strong. I think that's what the general is hoping for long term, is just getting this bishop on a better square. But there should be a lot of options, a lot of different ways for white to play this position. Queen can come here. Well, queen can't come here in this position. This arrow was another hypothetical line. It's a pretty bad arrow for us. These two have the same rating. They do not have the same rating. General Zod is 8 points higher rated. Those 8 points are hard to earn. But yeah, they're very close to each other in rating. All right, here. Feels like Tom and Ryan are in a tight game. We're going to be looking less at the Chuck versus Arya game, as it feels like that one is about to be wrapped up. It looks like Chuck is going to get on the board for his first win of the tournament. Rook to e2. So I think the idea of rook to e2 is he wants to play rook to e1, wants to double up and attack this weak pawn on e6. I feel like that's the biggest weakness of Ryan's position, is that pawn on e6. So this is a very logical thing to do from Tom's perspective. Zod plus 1.3 on the engine, because after bishop f3, the engine hated that move. Why does the engine hate that move? So the engine says this is about equal, and then says that's almost a pawn worse. So what is wrong with that move? So one thing to point out is we've got this bishop idea here. We can hit the rook and hit the pawn. So no, this is Timbo. This is Zod's game right here. They are in action. There is an error with his DGT board. So if you look at the pinned message, you can get his game. He has the black pieces taking on David Luscombe in round number 4. So I'm trying to think, why is moving this bishop bad? And it opens up the d3 square for this bishop.
Can Zod just play rook a d8? Then after knight takes c6, bishop takes c6, the queen moves, and then bishop takes on f3. That knight's not a bad knight on c5, and that bishop on g3 isn't doing much.
I would think that maybe we get this awkward pawn structure potentially in that line. Rook a d8 is the number 2 computer move. And then knight c6, bishop c6, and queen e1 would be the moves played after that. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3. Interesting.
No, you take back with bishop takes c6. And the queen has to do something because there's a rook on d8 looking at it.
Correct. That is the engine line. I don't want to make moves on the board, because if it does, then it under this one, it will say that those are the moves that are played because these are being manually inputted in the game. We're not getting them from a feed. But you're correct. Rook to d8, and then after the exchange, knight takes, bishop takes. We're on the queen here. The queen has to move. The engine says queen to e1 is the best move. Then we can take bishop to f3. If the rook takes, then the rook takes f3. You're forcing this awkward pawn structure here with an h and an f pawn for white. And hopefully have some long-term weaknesses to attack. And a nice open d file for your rook. So that looks to be a good position for black there. And also, in a similar idea, knight takes knight. We see queen takes, and then rook to d8. I think that the reason why the engine says this is slightly better is the queen has less good squares to go to. It's kind of forced to go to f2. And then after the bishop's exchange, all right, yeah. So the general has gone, knight takes knight, and after queen takes, we see rook d8 on the board. Jab chess, there is another round at 2:30. The round at 2:30 will be the grand finale. So the queen will move somewhere, and then after the bishop takes on f3, white will have a very awkward pawn structure, as Mark was talking about. Chris wants more arrows. I'm trying to become the next Hikaru. Does Zod have a FIDE rating? Zod does have a FIDE rating. His FIDE rating is 1999. He's almost a WCM. Okay, maybe it doesn't work like that. Yeah. I guess in today's society, he could be close. 1 point away. That would be a way that he could become viral, is if he tried to make that claim. I'm just 1,000 rating points from Hikaru. That is true. That close. Why aren't these events rated both USCF and FIDE? Well, FIDE has certain rules and certain TDs that can run them. We do have one TD in Oklahoma who can run FIDE-rated events. I believe we only have one. And she is not the TD for this event. So, not everyone can just run that. Yeah, NM is 2200 USCF, but 2000 FIDE is WCM, as been mentioned earlier in the chat. So, he's got 2 points out of 3. So Zod will play round 5 no matter what happens in his round 4 game. This is a tournament, a Swiss tournament, a round robin Swiss tournament. So all 6 players will play 5 games. They will play 1 game against each player, regardless of the results that happen on the board. This game has had a lot of action. I want to scroll back just a little bit to recap it. We have rook to b6, putting a natural pin onto this bishop here. King to c3, getting off the file with the rook. Knight takes d4, a tactical shot by Ryan. We saw this idea earlier in the game where the engine was saying that Ryan was basically up a pawn. But now it's less effective now than it was earlier in the game, but it still looks to be pretty interesting to me. So we sacrifice a piece temporarily, but we have this pawn fork, forking the bishop and the knight. So we will be getting the piece back momentarily. So not So some people would call this a piece sack. Other people would say not a true piece sack. Where's that guy who said? Where's that guy who had his live rating? I think he said that he would end up at 21.95 if he got 4 out of 5. Yeah, I think William Lynn, who was on my broadcast yesterday, had a live rating for him. And then I also said that I put in the rating calculator that if he got 4.5 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, he would have been above 2,200. But obviously, with the loss to Ryan in round number 3, that's no longer mathematically possible. If he wins rounds 4 and rounds 5, 21.95 is what the rating estimator
It's a
said.
positional idea. Ryan is mobilizing his E and D pawns.
Oh yeah, this is I like this idea from Ryan for sure. Especially this E6 pawn is kind of the biggest weakness in his position. If he can kind of get that moving, like if you can get that to E5 and have it have the pawn on E5 and a pawn on D5 and kind of control the center, I feel like that his biggest weakness might become one of his better strengths. It's not a piece sack because a piece sack is a piece sack. I mean, he sacks a piece temporarily, but he will get it back. So Ryan, Tom now thinking here needs to find bishop to a5 according to the engine. A very natural move. Though it's also tempting if I'm him to just play bishop takes c5 with the idea of keeping this knight on d4, attacking the pawn on e6. Though I think after knight takes here, we're guarding this pawn enough with the 2 rooks, the knight, and the king. Don't think we can get enough material on this, unfortunately. And if you play a move like rook to e1, we can play e5 immediately, I believe. So if we did this, takes, and then tried this, yeah, you have e5. I was somewhat worried about that. So that would just lose once these pawns get rolling. So Ryan asking some difficult questions in this position for sure. Curious about rook takes e6 in this position. So interesting. The engine says that this rook is a lot better. This one's instinctual for me. But after this, knight takes, c takes is check. Then after king takes, we can sacrifice the rook back, and Ryan would get down into this ending where he's got 2 minor pieces versus a rook. And this would pretty much be a 2-result type of game because the 2 minor pieces are never going to lose this. This could still end in a draw. But yeah, the rook isn't going to win this. All right, it's the live position. All right, we have some moves in this game. Queen to e3 played. Rook to d3 was the number 1 engine move. Queen to e2. And bishop takes f3. This will end up forcing either he plays pawn takes f3 or rook takes f3. Either way, if we exchange a pair of rooks, he has to play pawn takes f3. And this is already a target in the position. Yeah, immediately, because we have this rook on d3, which is already targeting this pawn. And yeah, you could move the pawn to f4, but now you're really hurting the potential scope of this bishop. I mean, I guess you can try to reroute it. But I would think that the general has a slightly better position as white seems to be a little bit more passive and will have a pawn weakness on f3 at the end of all of this.
The general is getting complete control of the d file.
Yeah, that too. That's another idea is he can He could also consider moving his queen to d7 or d8, and then maybe move his rook up to d2, and then capture the second rank, which would be very annoying as well. So after rook takes f3, I think we will see this exchange of rooks by the general, which will give him a better structure. Yep. On the board, pawn takes is the only move, and David does indeed play that. So the engine is recommending queen to d7 or queen to d8. Queen to d7 quickly played, as Mark was hinting at seizing the b file, and this is a very difficult position to play if you are David. This rook ultimately is a lot more active than this rook on its starting square. And there's not a real easy way to activate white's rook. And when you get closer to the endings, the side with the more active rook is often just better, even if they're down a pawn. A lot of times an active rook is worth more than a pawn. And right now the general definitely has the much better rook. The knight looks awkward at the moment. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the knight might get rerouted. The knight also needs a Gatorade break, because on move 13 through move 18, it moves 6 times in a row by itself. So it needs hydration. It just needs a break. Just let it chill on c5, and we don't need to move it anymore. It's moved a lot this game. It just wants to have a stable home and not be on the move every single day. All right, here, Tom still thinking. One thing to note here is Tom has about 17 minutes left and Dryden is about 37. So a 20-minute time difference here. This could come into play because this is a somewhat complicating position, complex position, and Tom could get himself into some time pressure, assuming that these times on the clock are correct. So Zod is from the state of Oklahoma, I believe Oklahoma City, and that's how he got the invite to the Rozsa Invitational. This is a tournament where 6 of the top players from Oklahoma got an invite, and they're playing a round robin against each other. So 5 rounds, each will play every player 1 time. And yeah, that's how he got into this tournament. Ooh. Okay, we have some developments here. After queen to d7, we see bishop to f4, which is a prophylactic move by David, disallowing rook to d2. However, queen to d4 threatens the pawn on c4 and the bishop on f4. I also wonder if queen to f7, maybe winning the f3 pawn. It feels like, or queen to c6 coming in, attacking here. It feels like that bishop f4 might be allowing some tactics for the general to take advantage. Queen d4 feels very strong and feels very logical too. It feels like a very natural move that the general should be able to find. Doesn't feel like something that is outside of his realm of calculation ability. It's not like a true engine move. It's a natural human move. But also queen f7 was like the first thing that popped into my head. So I guess the issue here is queen f7 runs into bishop to e3. Bishop e3 hits the knight, and the queen is on the rook. So you have to be somewhat careful here. Yeah, Igor just now pointed that out into chat. That could get yourself into some problems. But the nice thing about the queen coming to d4 is if you do, you can't play bishop to e3 because we have 2 pieces on that square, so you would just lose your bishop. And this bishop has to retreat to a non-optimal square. At the minimum, we get the c4 pawn, and there might be better. Zod has won 2 games in this tournament. This is round number 4. He has a 2-win and 1-loss record entering this round. His 1 loss being to tournament leader Ryan Ambergy, who has a perfect 3 out of 3 score. And this position, a very interesting position against Tom Bromwich here. A chaotic game. The engine says it's about equal, but the reality is there's a lot more chaos here than what the engine says. Haven't checked this game in a while because I just assumed it was over, and it pretty much is. So I'll go back and then show why I haven't looked at it. So yeah, we got to this key position here. The bishop retreats. And the number 1 computer move is actually giving up the bishop from Arya. I mean, I'm almost resigning before I play this move. And we see a full rook. And just quickly updating here, Chuck playing super solid. And, yeah, we can take here if we would like. And he forces the rooks to come off. So now he's just up an entire bishop. And for a player of Chuck's caliber, this is a very routine position to convert. He's getting his king in and activated and showing very good technique. And this could actually be the final position because after exchanging, the king will have no moves. This king will eat the pawns. These pawns will run, and Chuck will get his first win of the tournament. I've got text messages here. Yep. Arya game out of sync. Chuck in dominant position will end soon. I agree that. So I think when the text I got was the Arya game is out of sync. I think the times here are incorrect because the time here is a lot less. Of course, the time in the David versus Josh game is also incorrect. Josh has not lost on time. He had a time advantage last time we heard, but that could have changed. And it looks like if the times are right, then Tom is really falling low on time here. But this position is resignable for white. So, yeah, Tom has been in a long think if this is correct. So after knight d4, Tom had 25 minutes left. And after c5, we see Tom, it's showing 10 minutes. If he has not made a move, then he has used over half of his time, over half of his remaining time on this move. Can't imagine Tom hasn't moved, maybe a transmission issue. I kind of agree, Chris, because there's not that many candidate moves. I mean, you're thinking about, I mean, maybe you look at some of these knight to e3 lines and even rook to e3 that was mentioned in the chat, but moving the bishop is just so natural. Maybe bishop to a6 or bishop to a3. Bishop to a5 or bishop to a3. If you move to bishop to a6, that would be a bad move and an illegal move at the same time. Bishop takes c5 is also an idea that I mentioned earlier, and one of the top engine moves as well. But bishop to a5 is the only one to maintain equality. It is kind of annoying to give up c takes d4 with check, but apparently it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. But whether or not Tom will feel that as well. All right, we have a move. Bishop a5 on the board. And now c takes d4 is also on the board. So, of course, Ryan's move very easy to find. And according to the timers, Tom really did go into the tank for that long. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it might be. King takes d4 is the only logical move here. We see that being played. And it's interesting, the number one computer move is rook c8, which is a hard move to find. e5. I would be thinking about like rook c6 because my rook is under attack by this bishop, and I don't want to allow that. This is also completely fine, but completely equal after takes and takes, and moving this rook over here, and we continue to play chess. Still some imbalances in the position, but yeah, this is a completely fine position for Tom to try to make something out of it. If the clocks are right, then Tom is getting into slight high pressure. All right, bishop f4 on the board. We're still waiting a move from the general here. Queen to d4 is what we expect. So rook to c8, and white can't take the rook on b6, I would assume. So one thing that he's pointing out is after this, that's cute. Yeah, rook c8. You can't take the rook because this is checkmate. It doesn't feel legal that a king can get checkmated on d4. That feels very illegal. I feel like if your king is in the center of the board, it should have plenty of squares to go to. But it indeed can get checkmated on the d4 square. That was something I had overlooked. We'll see if Ryan comes up with that idea. Can I remove arrows after analyzing to make the board more clear? Is there a quick way to do that? I guess I can, without creating more arrows. There. So question to people who are in the room, when I do those arrows, do they still appear on your screen, or is it just my screen? Or is it just the stream? I'm not familiar with how Classroom works. So we have our first game to go final. I'll go ahead and run through this entire game real quick. Oh, they see what I see. Okay, I gotcha. I need to be careful with those arrows then. So, a game that is final here. We see Arya open up with c4, and this will quickly transpose into Queen's Gambit like lines. And then we see a very late d5 being met with a b5. So we're transposing into a Binko Gambit, which is an opening that I also play sometimes. So I have a decent amount of familiarity with this. I thought that white had a pretty good position early here. The eval bar is always deceiving with the Binko. But things took a turn right here when white played. I feel like white is completely fine in this position, probably pretty balanced, somewhat equal, somewhat traditional Binko position here. And when white plays b3, this is the moment where I think everything starts to go wrong, and black is just positionally better the entire rest of the game after that. b3 to play bishop c4, but bishop takes f1 was played first. We see the queen come in. We get the pawn back that we gambited from the Binko, but we're keeping the same Binko pressure. All of white's pieces are just tied on the back rank and having a lot of mobility issues, while black can just apply all the pressure at once. This is exactly what you want from black in a Binko. We see this exchange here. So basically, Chuck was like, I want to go up a pawn in the ending. And interestingly enough, if Arya had played this and just gone down a pawn, this one might have been a difficult ending to convert. Actually, taking with the knight here is a mistake because of rook a1. And the white's actually better here because of that tactic. But you can take here. Oh, that's mate in 1. Okay, we're finding ways to lose this for Chuck. So even in this position, after bishop takes c3, this bishop capture was absolutely key. We kind of breezed by this game initially, and bishop takes c3 seems to be a mistake from Chuck, but sometimes when you make a mistake, your opponent makes an even worse mistake back, and then your mistake turns into a good move. And that's exactly what happened with rook c2. We have the bishop retreat, and in this position, Arya plays the number one computer move, which is just going into an ending down an entire bishop. Yeah, after rook a1, black plays rook a7. Yeah, that way the knight can retreat to b5 and guard the rook on a7. That's correct. Bishop a3, pawn to f3, and this is just... I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is just kind of basic. You could resign from there. All right, let's get back to where the action is. Had some chaos here. So, all right. So after pawn takes, we had king takes. We saw this position. Ryan had multiple options in this position. Let's go for e5 check. It's nice to get that pawn off of e6, have this nice center. King retreats, rook comes to c6, a very natural move. Bishops exchange, rook b2, trying to activate this rook, and potentially come in on this b6 square if this knight moves as well. Rook to a8, and rook to b5, coming in this way as well. d4, and king to f3, rook to a3. And we continue. What's my age? I am 35. As the Gen Zers says, I was born in the 1900s. And that makes me old, according to them. But interesting position here. Both sides have some activity. I mean, I kind of think that Ryan's going to be coming in here on c3, doubling right here, and maybe posing some pressure onto this d3 pawn, which could be hard to guard. But Tom's position is somewhat solid here. The engine says all zeros for any move that you play, pretty much, which is nice. Zod is up big now. All right, we've had some moves in Zod's game. So we last left off on bishop f4. We were hoping that the general would play queen to d4, and he indeed finds it. We see bishop to g5 on the board, and then knight to d7. I don't understand that. Is there a reason why we can't take this pawn on c4? Or am I just too pawn grabby? Okay, it's the number 3 move. And interesting, h6 is the number 1 move, but I also don't understand h6. So on h6, the number 1 move is bishop takes h6, which I really don't understand. What happens if we move our bishop here? So the reason is just the rook coming to d2, and probably the queen coming to b2 is just worth way too much. Yeah, the bishop has no good squares. So that would have
The
been
general doesn't want to allow any play down that G file.
Yeah, I mean, you could have had bishop takes h6 here, which would not have been a sound sacrifice, but, you know, you get this check, and then maybe you start seeing ghost with, like, queen g2 stuff. But this would have been completely fine for the general. That being said, he played knight to d7. We see rook to g1, wanted to get some play down onto that g file. We grab the pawn, which is proved by Miles. Grabbing the pawn. Threatening a check. And guarding against the check. So, rook to d1 on the board is a blunder because we can play knight takes e5, and you can't take here on e5 with the queen without giving up the rook on d1 with the check. And check is key because when the queen takes on e5, we'll be threatening a mate in one. But hypothetically, a sample line here would probably be something like this. Do we have mate? Wants to do queen c2, king h3. Queen f5 just ends the game because we have the queens come off. We're up in exchange and 2 pawns in the ending, which should be very easy to convert. So, wait. Oh, wait, I need to be careful. This is not an analysis board. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mike. I forget that I can't. I keep forgetting that I can't do analysis on this board. So this was played, this was played, this was played, this was played, this was played. Okay, so we know that rook d1 was played. And we know knight takes e5 is the best move. I'm going to delete everything after knight takes e5. All right. So if it was played, I'm sorry. But just going to go ahead. We can also just, I think, take here. And then maybe play queen to d5. Ooh, actually, I got to be careful, because if I take here, queen d5, pawn d5, I think pawn to e6 could be somewhat problematic. Knight f6 does guard the queening square. But this pawn and this bishop keep the king out of the game. So keeping those two squares out of it. So something to keep in mind. Oh, okay. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Special Agent Bill never doubted the Alekhine. All of the people who were believers today were the same people who were disbelievers yesterday. All right, should have some action here. So we left off to rook a3, knight e4, check, king e6. And now rook d2 feels like a big concession for Ryan to make, using his rook to guard a pawn. I think when Ryan woke up this morning, that wasn't what he had dreamed of doing today. But if Tom were to play rook to c3, Ryan could play king to e2 and cover up the pawn that way. So we have queen takes, rook takes d1 on the board, queen takes d1 on the board, and interestingly enough, the general goes for the line that I was just showing. And if we take, I want to say e6 would be what I would play, but apparently, oh wait, we can just play knight to c5 if he plays e6, and if pawn to e7, you've got king f7, which stops the pawn from queening. So this ending appears to be favorable for the general. We've already got these two pawns on light squares. This pawn's on a light square. These two pawns can easily get to light squares if they would like. This king's going to come up the board and get into a great position. The general does have to be careful though, because you can't do this, this, and then this with the king on this square. Because after bishop takes, then king takes, this pawn, this e-pawn would run and be unstoppable. So a minor thing. But a favorable endgame for the general. Also, one problem for David is going to be this bishop right here on h6. So after king f5, this bishop no longer has access to the diagonal it wants to have access to. So we can see c5 and then d4 ideas maybe kind of get pushed. And this bishop is somewhat locked in. It can't go to f8, which is its natural way it wants to activate itself. So this bishop is somewhat checkmated. Something I just now noticed. It can't really go this direction. I mean, I think it needs to go to g5 and then to h4 and then to e1. So it takes a while. If it tries to go the other way to g7 to f6, the knight can immediately capture it. It can't come to f8 because the knight covers that square. So a little bit of an awkward bishop here for white, and that's part of the reason why the advantage is so big for black in this ending. All right, still waiting on a move from Tom. A little bit of a time advantage here for Ryan, about a 24-minute time advantage. Igor mentions pawns fixed on dark squares is horrible for white. It's an easy win, even if not up a pawn. But we're also up a pawn. Yeah, Zod could win on either half of the board, potentially. I think that the queen side with the 4 versus 2 majority is the logical side to win on. I just got a text from the tournament director that currently General Zod has 30 minutes on his clock and White has 10 minutes on his clock. So a 20-minute time edge for the General, as well as an advantage on the board. So if he can convert this, he would go on to 3 points out of 4, which would put him at a minimum of lone second place. And hey, if Tom Bromwich could pull off some magic in this one, then he could move up to a tie for first. But would need help to achieve a tie for first. Though I believe the tie breaks for this tournament would be head-to-head, if I'm not mistaken, or that could just be for the state championship. I know for the state championship they don't do ties. It's a head-to-head tie break, and then after that you use the official how my opponents did tie breaks. But obviously you don't have how your opponents did tie breaks in this tournament because you play the exact same opponents. But I think the first tiebreak might be head-to-head result. Was Maxwell invited? If so, why didn't he play? I don't know if he was invited or not. I believe he's currently in college, though. So, in college out of state as well. I believe he's going to UCF. Chat could probably correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard that somewhere. All right, we have some moves in this game. So after rook d2, b6 was played. g4, so trying to open and consolidate this over here. King g4, rook c1. Getting this rook active in the game makes a lot of sense. f4, rook to g1 played, and king f3. Chris has confirmed. Excellent. So rook h1. And threatening this pawn. f5. A nice little tactic here by Tom, but I think it gets ignored. If you take here, the fork, that won't happen. But just so chat knows, you cannot take this pawn. The king will need to retreat to either f7 or e7. But this knight is holding these two pawns down very nicely for Ryan. And then maybe this pawn could be a weakness long term. So maybe a king g4. I mean, I kind of like. If I didn't have the eval bar, I would like white here. The eval bar says black is better. But I like this king coming in here and marching up the board with potentially this h-pawn marching up. Obviously, maybe the knight coming to f6. I think I would get myself checkmated here if I was white, if I'm being 100% honest. Because I would march this way, knight f6, and then get checkmated somehow with like rook g1. With this pawn taking out another escape square as well. So we have some moves here in this game. b4 played. a6, putting his pawns on light squares. King to e3. b6, trying to get a pair of connected passed pawns. King d4. King to e6, guarding this pawn. h3, just kind of a waiting move, I think. Waiting for the inevitable c5 break. And now white has a couple of options. They can play king c3. This would disallow black from having two connected passed pawns. And or he can take, he takes in the game, which will allow b takes c5, and these pawns will go up the board and be somewhat problematic. But past c and d pawn, this should be a decisive advantage for black. And the general should go up to 3 points out of 4. A very good result. Yeah, Mark mentioned that Matt, I probably mispronounced that name terribly. I'm sorry. Is a pediatric resident physician who has 0 time. So there are players in Oklahoma that are higher rated than some of these players, but were unavailable for the event. And this event was also rescheduled. Mark Halsey, who was on the call some today and some yesterday, was one of the original players, but elected to withdraw because he had a wedding anniversary, and you've got to make the wife happy for travels and stuff like that. So real life has kept some players out of it too. But these are the top 6 players from Oklahoma who have nothing better to do than play another chess tournament. That's actually the more accurate way of framing it. Which there's nothing wrong with that, of course. Rook f1, attacking this pawn. And I still want to play king g4. What happens if I play king g4? Oh, I lose to this. I'm just curious what the engine's saying how I'm going to lose this game. I said I would get mated. I predicted that I would get mated this way. Geez, so that's something that Tom has to watch out for. With Tom being at like 5 minutes, he could easily make the same blunders I'm making. It's easy to miss that your king marching up the board could get mated. I mean, he is a national master. He probably doesn't make as many mistakes as I do. But it's the same type of mistake that, you can make under time pressure. And knight to f2 is just an unsatisfying move. If we're making that move, we're basically conceding that Ryan has the better position, which I don't want to do if I'm Tom. Because, he's been fighting hard this game. You don't want to give up this pawn on f5 for nothing either. So that's getting a little bit uncomfortable for Tom. Ryan looks to have the better position there. King to e3 played. So a nice position here for the general. He might even could sack the knight for 2 pawns and this might be winning, but he should not do that. So Tom finds the number 1 computer move, which is knight f2. It does prevent this pawn from falling. He does want to keep the material somewhat equal. And we've got rook a1 ideas, rook g1 ideas if you're Ryan, or potentially both. Maybe this knight is the perfect defensive piece here, just holding everything together. That being said, I don't hate knight f2 as much as I originally thought, because the knight could go to g4 and then go to e5, and then that's good. So maybe there's some hope there. Is this correct? g5? So the idea of g5 is if bishop takes g5, you've got knight to e5. And then if pawn takes, king takes, and that is going to be a winning king and pawn ending. So you can't take back on e5. If you leave the tension, then we're threatening we're threatening pawn takes f4, bishop takes f4, and then knight to e5. The only thing that you have to be careful of the general is when you're trading off pawns, if white can trade off enough pawns, they can sack the bishop for 2 pawns and maybe draw. It might be the simplest way to convert. It could be. There's enough pawns on the board that I think it's completely fine. Take those arrows off. And we see Ryan come in with rook a1, which was a very logical idea. You don't want to move your rook back to b2 to guard the pawn. So I would prefer to do something more active if I was Tom. Maybe something like a knight g4 to try to attack this e5 pawn. Give this pawn up, take, and then come in here. So like hypothetically, take here, take here, take here, and then material would be equal hypothetically, but the engine does not like this. So what happens if I go here? Rook g1. I want to go this way. Oh, okay, I don't want to go that way. So I want to go this way. And then, the e4 idea is just going to be problematic. And you can't go to h2 without hanging your knight. So knight g4 doesn't work because of the e4 pawn break. This is a very difficult position for Tom. I think he's just about to lose the a pawn. What if he does the unthinkable and does rook b2? Simply king f6, and we're going to walk up and grab this free pawn. Yeah, just a very difficult position for Tom to play here. We see bishop g5 and knight e5 on the board. We were expecting those moves. This bishop is still somewhat awkward. All right, so after rook a1, we have king f3 on the board. And Ryan decides to grab the free pawn, which is what we expected. Link for the Zod game. I feel like it should still be pinned, but it might not be. Oh no, it said I couldn't pin it for more than 30 minutes. That's correct. Knight to e5 here. All right. So we have an ending right here with Ryan is up a pawn. And the engine says everything is fine. Interesting. So it feels like we lost a big battle. But knight g4. Ooh, so it does not like knight g4. Is it because of e5 or e4, I wonder? So it doesn't like knight g4 because of rook a5. Yeah, hard to hold for Tom when he's down a pawn here. And apparently knight g4 took away the equality, though I don't understand why. I mean, it says rook a5, but the rook can come back. And I don't see the immediate knockout. Maybe it's just freeing up this knight will be worth something. Maybe you could go to like f6. King d6 is logical. You're activating your king. You're protecting this pawn. Some more moves in the general game here. Bishop to e7, d4 check. King goes back to d2, knight to d7, guarding the pawn. So the general is this player. The DGT board was not working. So he is black in this game. We're getting the moves manually from the tournament director. Bishop to d6. Thinking c4. Maybe. King to e4. And slowly push our double connected pawns up the board. And those should be decisive. So the general should move to 3 points out of 4, assuming he converts this position. And Tom is in a very difficult position against Ryan, who is now pushing that h-pawn up the board. And we can already kind of get ideas of maybe an f6, and then after this, force this line here, which would be unpleasant if we can get the rook to the back rank there. All right, here the general activating the king, showing very good technique. You want to have your king and your pawns all connected, all working together. And David is just playing this out, hoping for a miracle. It's going to be brutal if the general does end the tournament 21.95. I wouldn't call that brutal. I mean, when you start at 21.58, getting to 21.95 sets you up for the next tournament where if you just have a slightly good tournament, you don't even need an amazing tournament to hit master from 21.95. You just need a slightly good tournament. And then he can make master his next event out. He is definitely on the edge of achieving that. I mean, any point, any tournament where you're gaining points, you're getting closer to that milestone, right? So he appears to be getting closer. And if he holds and wins this game, as I totally expect him to, then with 3 points out of 5, I feel like, 3 points out of 4, even if he loses his last round game, he'll gain probably like 20 rating points, something like that. How many rounds are there in total? 5. How often are chess events like this ran? There are invitational tournaments held all the time across the nation. In Oklahoma, this is an annual event. So this is the only one specifically related to Oklahoma for these players. So this would be like the only invitational that these players would type of go again into. And at the highest levels of chess, there are invitationals all the time. You can ask Hans Niemann about that and about the politics of invitations and how they get handed out. Did anyone in here watch the Netflix Untold documentary? I wonder. That was a very interesting documentary with Hans Niemann, Magnus, and of course the classic anal beads story, which went viral for the chess world, which I think is a completely ridiculous accusation, but it does get media clicks. I want to point out here, great technique by the general here. From a prophylactic standpoint, he's fixed the pawns on dark squares. That way the bishop has nothing to target. You know, this pawn right here can never be targeted. These two pawns are going to be what wins him the game. And he can slowly maneuver his knight, you know, up here and take right here if you would like. And just win the game. All right. Meanwhile, Ryan has some work to do to convert this ending against Tom Bromwich. Tom has been fighting hard all game. Really a nicely hard-fought game. This one has been close the entire time. Knight can come back to f2. Be threatening to go to e4, which is a fork. Ryan will see that. But the knight f2 also guards the pawn on d3. So the general will not gain FIDE rating points for this tournament because this is not a FIDE rated tournament. Lead Chess just defaults and shows FIDE ratings, but this is not rated in FIDE. But assuming the general holds this position, I think that he will gain some rating points. The only question is how many based on his last round result. So we had some quick moves, and now we're starting to slow down here. If the timer is right in the Tom versus Ryan game, Tom is now under a minute on his clock. And these are going to be very difficult moves to find. Ryan, of course, is going to press for this ending all that he can. Rook back to b3 feels like a concession from Tom that you don't like to make. You don't like to move your rook to defend pawns. but it also seems okay at the moment. Looks like that Tom just did not have ideas for that f6 h6 idea that I was trying to get to work. And maybe Ryan could do like a rook d1, rook h1, and try to win this pawn on h5. That has to be a consideration as well. But Tom, with 1 minute and 15 seconds left, will be playing effectively the rest of the game on increment, while Ryan has a healthy 25 minutes plus remaining in this game. Right, have some moves here. We have, okay, after a4, we have knight f6, bishop to a5, knight to d5, saying that we're going to go ahead and win this f4 pawn. That way, we will have 2 connected passers, and you will have 0 connected passers. There is no way to guard this pawn. There is no way to create a threat. So this is an ugly position from David's perspective. See, the king will move over. Might as well grab the free pawn. There's no reason not to. If he wants, he can even go over here and then try to go pawn grabby right here. I don't think there's any way to stop that. And there's no real way for white to generate counterplay. So the general has his pick of what he wants to do. But simply king e4 and winning with these pawns moving up the board should be good too. The arrows are... I'm getting rid of the arrows for chat. A few moves played in this game. So rook d2, rook comes back to b3, king to d5. The engine says you need to play knight to f2, but Tom goes for the h6 idea. After g takes, we see knight takes. I don't understand why the engine is saying what it's saying. But knight c5, I guess the idea is we win this d pawn and we have these 2 connected e and d pawns that are passed and will be very problematic. You think he might need another pass pawn to counter the bishop? No, I think he's fine. The thing is even if the bishop sacrifices itself for these 2 pawns, the knight and the king can win one of these pawns on either side of the board and then win the game. So he can go back after the bishop is gone if he would like. I also not convinced there's a way for white to force this bishop to be traded for both pawns with the knight escorting it properly. But looks like it's just going to be some standard cleanup here for the general, and he should be going on to 3 points. The engine really hates what Tom just did, though I don't understand why the engine hates it as much as it does. Rook h2, what happens on this? Rook h5, and we're winning this pawn. And being up 2 pawns is going to be problematic for Tom. Interesting. The engine hated that sequence. So knight c5, threatening this d3 pawn. But it does give up the b6 square. So after rook takes b6, knight takes d3, and this f pawn is very quick. So it's kind of a race between the f pawn and these e and d pawns. But Tom has some potential counterplay here, because Ryan has to respect the speed of this f pawn, and the knight on h6 does help escort it. Ooh, but no, moving there. I think he needed to push that pawn and just launch the race. I think knight g4 is going to be the mistake that's probably not going to be able to recover from, because now we're just play e3 and we're just too fast. Needed to go f6 and race. Right here, getting moves in. Probably see king to d4 next, with the idea of playing c3. Or just c3 immediately if you take with the bishop. That's a losing king and pawn ending. So that makes sense. Bishop takes, knight takes, king to e3. Followed by king to e2. And the pawn on d goes to d2 and d1 and queens itself. So after e4 check, king moves over in e3, and this pawn is fast. And I think that Ryan has a decisive advantage and is about to move to 4 points out of 4. This was a pretty good game from Tom. It was quite competitive majority of the way. And then Tom got a little bit of time pressure, and that's where things started to slip. We are probably getting very close to a resignation here in both games. I don't think that either game has too much time left. The idea of e2 and e1 is going to be hard to stop. So the king g3, e3, we do see f6, but he has gotten to that idea a little bit slow. You can't allow this pawn to go here because it queens with check. And one important thing is on this line, queen, you take here, knight takes e1, you push the pawn, you have rook d3, which is check, and now you get your rook to f3 and win the game. So without this check, it would be a little bit more problematic. But this rook to d3 check, no. King moves, and here we just have a rook and the other side has a knight. Yeah, Tom fought very well. The general won is what chat is saying. That could be correct. I don't know who is saying that. But this is a resignable position if you are white. Resigning is a legal move. Was a good, nicely fought game from Tom, but unfortunately coming up a little bit short. I have gotten text message confirmation from the tournament director that indeed David has resigned and the general has gone up to 3 points out of 4. So we'll go through this very, very quickly. For those of you who just now tuned in, we got the Alekhine, which apparently the general is an expert in. And unfortunately, in round 3, it did not go the way he wanted it to. But he is not going to give up on something that he loves, which is the Alekhine. He comes right back and gets a super solid position. King H1 throws away White's opening advantage from, the small opening advantage that White has in the Alekhine. But that was fast. Hit the button and things went quickly. Okay, F, there we go. There. Here, and now here's one of my favorite parts of the game. Move 13. Move 13, we move the knight once. We move the knight twice. We move the knight 3 times. We move the knight 4 times. We move the knight 5 times. 6 times in a row, the general has moved the same knight. On move 18, he moved the same knight 6 times in a row. A third of the game was just that knight moving constantly. But that knight will get a nice little Gatorade break for a while as the position just completely falls apart from David. A nice positional position here. After bishop f4, bam, queen comes into d4. And this is just a winning position for the general. Takes. We get down to this ending, and we just saw this here. Converted very nicely. Very good technique here from the general. No counterplay here for David whatsoever. Just textbook how to finish off your opponent with a superior in-game position. And David resigns right here. And it looks like we have another game that has gone final. Ryan Amberge has won as well. After E2, Tom resigns. As I mentioned before, this line here, if we play it out, we almost get that pawn up the board. There's only one move that wins, and that's here. And that's because that is a check. And unfortunately, the rook gets back in time for Ryan, and Ryan will go on to win the game and go up to 4 points out of 4. If they use the same tie-breaking systems as the state championship, that might have already clinched winning the Rozsa Cup. Josh at 3 points out of 4 could, in theory, tie him with a win, and if Ryan were to lose the last round game. But that is probably unlikely. I'll go through and run through this game very, very quickly, and then we'll take a break before the game's at 2:30. We have a Caro and a very interesting approach here from Tom with the b4. Apparently sacking a pawn, but apparently it's completely sound. Ryan lets not take said pawn. We get a very awkward pawn structure for Tom, but they continue to go through here. Lots of maneuvering in this game. It was mostly even through the majority of the game. Very hard fought game from Tom. Good effort here. You're always in danger when you're playing someone like Ryan of just getting blown off the board. But we see this knight takes d4 idea, which brought a little bit of chaos to the position. But Tom navigates this chaos very well, and it's still equal right here. So the rook b1 and rook b5 ideas here. And just slowly but surely trying to generate some sort of counterplay. It feels like f5 was the first move where things kind of started to slip for Tom. I feel like he was pretty consistently even until this. And now after f5, it just created a weakness for Ryan to exploit. And then that forces this knight to come back awkwardly. Ryan wins a pawn, and this is always going to be a very difficult ending down a pawn, having to have the rook come back passively. H6 in time pressure, just trying to create something, but unfortunately his knight gets a little bit offsides. And the last chance for Tom here is if he plays f6, we could have quite the finish here with this pawn being very quick. But apparently e4, king g3, and we play chess. I mean, we could have a situation where we sack this rook for this pawn and then win because of these two connected passed pawns being quick. But that is not what happened in the game. Instead, we see knight g4, e4, and unfortunately for Tom, the pawn is too quick. And, well, actually, Tom resigned in this position. I played out a couple more moves just to show what would happen. But a good win for Ryan, and a good win for the general, who was able to win this game after e4, and then the DGT board died. And Chuck, who will be facing the general next round, was able to get his first win of the tournament, so he will be feeling good heading into that matchup. The general will have the white pieces in the final round, looking to get 4 out of 5, and hypothetically getting a 2195 rating. I am going to take a break right now. Next round starts in about 1 hour and 18 minutes. I'll come back hopefully more well-rested than I was at the start of round number 3, because I have slightly more time. I will end the stream now, and I will see you all later.